Second.
All right, with that, I will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, December 15th, 2020. The meeting is being recorded. All members are appearing remotely. And just out of the box, if there is any sort of technical issues tonight where we need to reschedule and we can't get to any of these items, they'll be rescheduled to our next meeting on January 6th. But hopefully we can get through this. So first of all, is there anyone here to speak to anything that is not on the agenda tonight? Agenda items will have a different time for people to participate and comment or ask questions, but for anything not on the agenda tonight, you can either raise your Zoom hand, or if your camera is on, wave your actual hand. If you're calling in from a cell phone, which I don't think I see, you can do *9 to raise your hand, or you could even just do *6 and unmute and ask to address us. All right. I don't see anyone. So moving right along. First on the agenda is the continued public hearing for Apical Inc. seeking a special permit under section 10.10 and 12.7 of the zoning ordinance for the renovation and reuse of an existing structure and associated driveways, parking areas, and site work to operate a recreational cannabis retail establishment, property located at 102 Northampton Street in the Highway Business Zoning District. So, is there someone here from the applicant to update us on where we stand and the new materials we got?
Hi, this is Ellen Fryman, Schatz and Fenton, 1441 Main Street, Springfield.
I'm on mute.
And we have submitted the requested documents that were requested at the last hearing. So we have a new site plan with more details that we worked with our neighbor and are, I believe, in agreement on the changes that were made. And we could show it if that's, Curtis, if you have it.
I do.
I don't know if people want to see it, but
right.
We can just talk about what changes were made.
I think it would be helpful to put it up on the screen so we can see it, and people at home who might not have had a chance can take a look at it too.
Give me just a second.
Yeah, thanks, Curtis.
No problem.
I also have it, Curtis, if you want to give me permission.
Yeah, I'm downloading it from our shared drive, and it's taking a hot second. So with everyone's permission, I'm just going to give Mark co-host, considering he's been doing it for the last 2 meetings and has done a just fine job. So.
Yeah, that's great.
Mark, it's not. Do you have? Can you do screen share right now, Mark?
I believe so. I
okay.
Should be able to.
You're all set to go then.
It says host disabled. I'm not added.
Okay, 1 second. Here, just share for mine. 1 second. I'm just going to do mine. I'm just going to share my own screen just because I just got everything up. So this is from the last set of submittals. The primary one that the board, that's salient for the board's review, is the site plan as presented here, and the paint plan that you see here, including site details that were requested, including site signage, the chains and posts, the enclosure for the waste container, and a tentative planting schedule.
Great. So, Ellen, do you want to walk us through this, or somebody else from the team?
I don't know. Is Alan on the call?
I don't see him on the list of participants.
Okay. So, well, I can just tell you, it's pretty much what Curtis identified, and if Kyle wants to add something, but, you know, we do have now the clear path and what's going to be painted on the plan, showing where the different markings are going to go on the plan. And then, as Curtis mentioned, details of the chain reflectors, chain posts, details of the shrubs that are going to be planted on the ground, not on the, no, we're not going to have planters. And then we have details of the signs to be installed. So, but in addition to the site plan, we submitted the opening day queuing plan. And I think that was pretty much, so we're going to show we show 9 planters along Northampton Street, and then some up against the building. So that's going to be in place of we're going to have planters instead of plants instead of planters. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about what we've added. I think it's just more detail from what we had last time. It was the detail that was requested.
Yep. Thanks, Ellen. Planning board members, any questions or comments about either the plans, the site plans, or the opening day plans? All right, any members of the public, any comments or questions about the application or the new documents today? Again, you can either raise your Zoom hand or raise your hand on camera, or *9 if you're on a cell phone.
I'm gonna just stop screen sharing so we can see the whole screen. If 1 second. I can obviously pull that back up at anybody's desire.
Yep. And I don't see anyone here with a hand raised. Okay. Planning department, Jeff or Curtis, any questions, comments, thoughts about what we've got here?
I'll provide a quick commentary. So the applicant, after the last meeting, I reached out to, with the applicant's permission, obviously, to Architect Nardi and Cott, just to discuss what I understood the board's outstanding requests to be. And the 2 submittals that you see there, as well as the opening day plan, are largely in response to what the board had communicated at the last meeting what they wanted, which was a complete set of information about what exactly was being proposed in terms of the opening day plan, the plantings, the signage, and the painting schedule, as there was a degree of uncertainty about each of those 4 elements. The plan as submitted showcases the site with a chain and reflectors dividing the site from its eastern neighbor, currently used by Captain Jack's, and signage that says no applicable parking towards the site southwest, where you've got the Cernak fuel site. The paint plan clarifies that they're going to be painting all 4-inch wide parking stripes basically everywhere they see, including the 2 ADA compliant parking spaces, and the signage throughout is MADOT compliant. The planting schedule is new. Previously, they were talking about not knowing what plants they were coming in. It's a mix of arborvitae and other appropriate non-invasive species, as far as I know. Obviously, that can be subject to change at planting time, but I asked the applicant to provide like a set of what they considered most likely within certain reason. One of the changes from the last time is that no longer are there planters proposed, that they've moved to in-ground planting. In as far as I have any opinion on the matter, and that should be taken with limited weight, if at all, I like in-ground plantings. They tend to be hardier, so.
Thank you, Curtis. Jeff, yeah?
Yep, sorry. I guess, my understanding is that the board did task Curtis with drafting a decision for consideration. But before maybe the board does that, I guess one question that I would just like to ask, I guess, of the applicant, and just for general understanding, is, if there is a vote potentially tonight, recognizing that the decision would have to get filed with the clerk and there is a 20-day appeal period, But if there was some explanation of an understanding of your timeline, proceeding forward, just to get that kind of just open and discussed briefly at least, is what would be a timeline. Understanding that I still need Cannabis Control Commission approval at some stage, but just having that quick overview of a timeline from here on out. What are you envisioning for a timeline that just might be helpful for people?
Pat, your best can explain that.
Yeah, I think we're looking at probably getting into construction sometime in January, and we're not going to be able to paint the asphalt or lines until a day that's warm, or get into the ground to pour some concrete. I think that's something the contractor is going to have to address. It's, the building inspector. So we're looking at hopefully opening in April would be our timeline. In March, it should warm up a little bit. We'll be able to finish up the exterior, put the plantings down, put everything in place prior to getting a CO.
Great. Thank you,
That's
Kyle.
helpful. Thanks.
Yep.
Okay, so as Jeff said, there is a draft decision that's been prepared by the planning department, Curtis. So what I'm going to do is read through the findings, and planning board members obviously chime in if there's anything that you think needs to be altered. This is based on our prior hearings too. So findings. In accordance with MGL Chapter 40A and Section 12.7 of Easthampton zoning ordinance, the planning board found. So the first is conformance with the provisions of the ordinances of the city of Easthampton, the general laws of Massachusetts, and all applicable rules and regulations of state and federal agencies. The proposed finding states the planning board finds that the applicant has received an active license from the Cannabis Control Commission dated December 10, 2019, and amended this license to reflect the location at 102 Northampton Street at a public hearing of the Cannabis Control Commission on October 8, 2020. The special permit is issued contingent upon all the applicants' receipt and maintenance of all relevant licenses from the Cannabis Control Commission.
I'm going to delete that first all.
Yep. Next, protection of city amenities and abutting properties through the minimizing of any detrimental or offensive uses or destruction of unique or important natural, scenic, or historic features on the site. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that the proposal constitutes a change in use from one retail use, motor vehicles, to another, cannabis, and involves extremely limited site changes, thereby minimizing offensive uses or destruction of natural or historic features on and around the site. Next, minimization of traffic and safety impacts of the proposed development on adjacent highways or roads and maximizes the convenience and safety of vehicular and pedestrian movement within the site. The proposal does not affect any unique natural or scenic features. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that the applicant has provided a range of mitigation measures to minimize impacts to surrounding properties, including traffic markings, signage, and physical barriers, landscaping to prevent traffic from accessing or leaving the site onto neighboring parcels under separate ownership, thereby limiting potential conflicts and confusion that would exacerbate on-site traffic. The Q plan includes provisions for high-intensity traffic in and around the site immediately after the opening of the cannabis retailer.
I'm going to capitalize applicant.
Okay. Next, adequacy of the methods of disposal of sewage and refuse and the drainage of surface and subsurface water and adequate means of protecting wetlands, watersheds, aquifers, and well areas. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that the conservation agent has found no impacts relevant to the Conservation Commission. Any cannabis-related waste will be handled by a licensed supplier, and other waste will be typical waste associated with a retail establishment. Next, mitigation of adverse impacts on the city's resources, including the effect on the city's water supply and distribution systems, sewage collection and treatment systems, fire protection, and streets. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that no information has been submitted regarding any negative impacts to any of the city's resources listed under this provision. Next, provision for the off-street loading and unloading of vehicles incidental to the normal operation of the establishment, parking, lighting, and internal traffic control. Proposed finding states the planning board finds the proposal exceeds the minimum number of parking spaces required for the use. The proposal provides 49 parking spaces, including 4 handicapped accessible parking spaces located and designed in compliance with ADA standards for accessibility. The proposal includes provisions for lighting and security features around the building associated with the product delivery protocol and procedures. The exterior trash enclosure is located such that vehicle transit and parking on site will not be impeded during collection. Next, applicants' efforts to integrate the development into the existing landscape through design features such as vegetative buffers and retention of open space or agricultural land. The proposed finding states the planning board finds that the proposed landscaping, including plantings installed at regular intervals along Northampton Street and along the eastern edge of the parcel, is suitable and appropriate for this use situated within the highway business zoning district.
I need to amend that one. The plantings, there's no longer planters along that eastern edge. They have instead proposed plantings around the structure.
Right, okay.
So I'll just update that one to be accurate. It does correctly say plantings though.
Thank you. Next, minimization of the area over which existing vegetation is to be removed. Where tree removal is required, special attention is to be given to the planting of replacement trees. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that no vegetation removal was proposed for the project. Next, the consistency of the development with respect to setback, area, placement of parking, architectural style, and landscaping of the surrounding buildings and development. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that the renovated building conforms to all required setbacks and is generally consistent with the design of other buildings in the area. The board found that the applicant provided vegetative buffering to provide adequate screening for parking spaces proposed in the front setback, and as such granted a waiver to allow parking in the front setback per 10.511A in the Easthampton zoning ordinance. Next, adequacy of the measures to prevent pollution of surface or groundwater to minimize erosion and sedimentation and to minimize changes in groundwater levels, increased runoff, and potential for flooding. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that the extant drainage system for the parking area has met all applicable stormwater regulations. Next, adequacy of the methods to ensure that the use will not constitute a nuisance by reason of unacceptable level of air or water pollution, excessive noise, or visually flagrant structures and accessories. Proposed finding states that the planning board finds that the proposal for a retail establishment is not anticipated to generate exterior odors from the transfer and storage of cannabis products. The Q plan and on-site parking attendant are intended to direct traffic and prevent loitering or congestion, which would negatively impact abutting properties. Moving along to our findings under section 10.10, adult use cannabis establishments. First, no cannabis establishment shall be located within 350 feet of pre-existing public or private school providing education in kindergarten or any of grades 1 through 12 in operation at the time of application for a special permit or site plan approval. Proposed finding states the planning board found that the proposed cannabis establishment is not within 350 feet of an existing school as defined in section 10.10 or CMR 935.500.110.3. Next, a cannabis establishment is permitted by special permit in highway business, downtown business, mixed-use mill industrial, and industrial zoning districts. The proposed finding states the establishment is located on a property situated in the highway business zoning district where the use is allowed with a special permit. Next, except in the mill industrial and downtown business districts, no cannabis establishment shall be located within a building containing residential units, including transient housing and group housing. Proposed finding states that the property does not contain any buildings with residential dwelling units. Next, no more than 6 cannabis retailers shall be allowed within the city. Special permit applications will be considered in the order in which the planning department receives a completed special permit application and confirmation that a completed license application has been received by the commission. Proposed finding states there are 2 requirements within this section. This application represents the 5th retail special permit granted in the city. The applicant has achieved both a complete application and an active license with the Cannabis Control Commission as of December 10th, 2019, as identified in CMR 935-500-102. Next, no cannabis retailer shall be located within 200 feet of another cannabis retailer except within the mill industrial zone. Distance shall be measured by a straight line from the nearest point of the property line in question to the nearest point of the property line where the marijuana establishment is or will be located. Proposed finding states there are no other cannabis retail establishments within 200 feet of the subject property. Next, no cannabis shall be smoked, eaten, or otherwise consumed or ingested on the premises except as may be allowed in a cannabis membership club. All cannabis establishments permitted under this section shall comply with all state and local laws, rules, and regulations governing the smoking of tobacco. Proposed finding states the proposal does not consider nor allow consumption of cannabis on the premises. The proposal provides specific security measures intended to prevent any consumption of cannabis anywhere within the subject property. Next, odor. No cannabis establishment shall allow the escape of noxious odor or gases. They shall incorporate odor control technology and provisions and ensure that emissions do not violate MGL Chapter 111, Section 31C. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that as a retail-only use, minimal odor mitigation measures are necessary. Next, signage. All signage shall comply with the requirements of 935 CMR 500 and section 10.0 of this zoning ordinance. Proposed finding states all signs comply with section 10.0 of the zoning ordinance. The proposed signs shall comply with the provisions of 935 CMR in that it does not contain any logos or designs that resemble marijuana. Next, hours. Cannabis retailers shall be open to the public no earlier than 10 a.m. and no later than 11 p.m. Proposed finding states this special permit limits the hours of operations from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days per week. The hours of operation apply only to retail sales open to the public and are not intended to restrict other employees or operations.
Jesse, can I interrupt for just a second on this one?
Yep.
So this was taken from the applicant's original application, and it was part of the Word document narrative that was submitted in October. I want to make sure that these suggested hours are still congruent with COT's vision. COT, is that 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. still the goal hours for Apical? You just muted yourself. You were unmuted and then you muted yourself.
Sorry. Yes, it is. For now,
Okay.
it is. I think there's an amendment in place, correct, with the ordinance committee for hours?
There is, but what your application is seeking here is, so right now, I think the bylaw allows for 10 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Oh, no, we'll stick with 10 to 8.
10 to 8 is all you guys need?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to make sure before we lock it into the decision.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Curtis.
No problem.
Actually, sorry, I wanted to interject too. Sorry. This is the findings, right? So the findings are in line with the current zoning. I do want to ask, because this is a new development, obviously, that there is a public hearing set for coincidentally in a couple minutes, whenever this is concluded though. The discussion is to allow retailers to open before 10 a.m. So it's yet to be decided, but there could be some potential opportunity, whether it's either in the finding or maybe in the condition, that we would want to potentially allow COT to come back maybe at a public meeting if the amendment passes. That could be a month or two from now, and if you wanted to present a plan to the board to open earlier, we might want to build in that flexibility. Otherwise, I would hate to have him to come in to formally amend the permit at this point.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
If COT desires, because you may desire to open at 10, it may be an inconvenience to do otherwise. But if you desired, it could be worded in such a way that it said at the earliest time allowed by current zoning.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is take the bolded section that says this special permit limits the hours of operation from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days per week, and I'll alter it to special permit limits the hours of operation from the earliest hour allowed by the City of Easthampton's current zoning ordinances to the latest hour allowed by the City of Easthampton's current zoning ordinance.
What if we just say it allows for operation to the fullest extent allowed by Easthampton's bylaws?
That's a little cleaner.
And if you take out the word current, then it will apply presumably even if it gets modified.
Yeah, indefinitely to whatever the ordinance is of the time.
And that way,
Prevents
Kyle,
the
you'll
need
just
for
have,
them returning.
and then Kyle, you'll have that flexibility, so you can decide. I mean, it doesn't mean you have to open earlier or stay open later, but you'll have that flexibility to whatever the bylaws allow.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you.
Great.
Hypothetically, while we're still on the subject, and I apologize for this counterfactual, but is there any logic towards defending the boundaries of the hours 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. in case a future zoning ordinance substantially cuts down on when something can operate?
No, there's nothing defending that. No, we'd be fine to operate.
Cool.
What is?
All right, good. If it's not a problem for you, I've got no further desire to keep looking at that.
All right. Moving on. Visual impact. Cannabis plants, products, and paraphernalia shall not be visible from outside the building in which the cannabis establishment is located and shall comply with the requirements of 935 CMR 500. No outside storage is permitted. Any artificial screening device erected to eliminate the view from the public way shall also be subject to a vegetative screen, and the board shall consider the surrounding landscape and view shed to determine if an artificial screen would be out of character with the neighborhood. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that the proposal contains a retail dispensary where the interior of the premises will not be visible from the street. No outdoor storage is proposed. Next, home occupation. Cannabis establishments are not permitted as a home occupation. Proposed finding states this project is a commercial retail establishment and does not constitute a home occupation. Next, community host agreement. No special permit shall be granted without first having an executed community host agreement with the city of Easthampton. Proposed finding states the applicant has executed a community host agreement with the city of Easthampton as required under CMR 935-500-101B6 and has submitted the certification form to the Cannabis Control Commission. Next, community outreach meeting. No special permit application shall be deemed complete by the planning department until a community outreach meeting in accordance with 935 CMR 500 has occurred. Proposed finding states the applicant has held a community outreach meeting as required under CMR 935-500-101 and has submitted a proof form to the Cannabis Control Commission. Next, state law. Cannabis establishment operations shall conform at all times to general laws, chapter 94G, and regulations issued thereunder. Proposed finding states the planning board has conditioned the special permit on continuous receipt and maintenance of all required permits from the Cannabis Control Commission as required by chapter 94G of the Massachusetts General Laws. License requirements. The applicant shall submit proof that the application to the CCC has been deemed complete pursuant to 935 CMR 500-102. Copies of the complete application to the extent legally allowed shall be provided as integral component of the application to the planning board, and no special permit application shall be deemed complete by the planning department until this information is provided. No person shall operate a cannabis establishment without having a license in good standing from the commission. No special permit shall be granted by the planning board to an applicant without the cannabis establishment first having been issued a provisional license from the commission pursuant to 935 CMR 500. Proposed finding states the planning board has conditioned the special permit on continuous receipt and maintenance of all required licenses and permits from the Cannabis Control Commission. The applicant has received an active license from the Cannabis Control Commission dated December 10, 2019, and amended this license to reflect the location at 102 Northampton Street at a public hearing of the Cannabis Control Commission on October 8, 2020. Energy use. All cannabis cultivators shall submit an energy use plan to the planning board to demonstrate best practices for energy conservation. Plan shall include an electrical system overview, proposed energy demand, ventilation system, and air quality, proposed water system, and utility demand. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that this provision is not applicable to a retail-only use. Line queue plan. The applicant shall submit a line queue plan to ensure that the movement of pedestrian and/or vehicular traffic along the public right-of-ways will not be unreasonably obstructed. Proposed finding states the planning board finds that the line queue plan provides adequate measures to control pedestrian and vehicular movement adjacent to the site, including but not limited to navigational signage, pavement markings to direct vehicle traffic, and an on-site traffic attendant to direct queuing of customers. The proposed retail establishment includes 2,400 square feet of retail space and an additional approximately 45 square foot vestibule to allow interior circulation and queuing where it will not impede visitation and site traffic. A condition of the special permit requires the planning board to review and approve the adequacy of the queue plan at a public meeting after 60 days. Said meeting shall include notice to abutters mailed by the applicant in accordance with Chapter 40A, Section 9. Traffic impact statement. Any cannabis establishment open to the general public shall submit a detailed traffic impact statement in accordance with Section 7.4104. Proposed finding states a traffic statement prepared by McMahon Associates dated September 11, 2020 was provided. Following initial discussion, an additional memo with additional data on automated traffic counts in the area of the development was provided to the planning board on October 20, 2020. The planning board finds that pursuant to the submitted statement that the proposed use will create minor increases in vehicle trip ends, but will not adversely affect prevailing traffic conditions in the vicinity of the project. The board also found that applicant has provided parking sufficient to accommodate normal operational traffic as well as opening day traffic, and has incorporated site design features, including signage, painted directional markers, and a parking attendant, to allow for access and circulation of the site to prevent queuing or traffic delays on the public right-of-way. The planning board will review and approve the adequacy of the queue plan at a public meeting after 60 days. Said meeting shall include notice to abutters mailed by the applicant in accordance with Chapter 40A, Section 9. This meeting will consider the impacts of the development on traffic on abutting streets and intersections. Parking. Parking shall be in accordance with Section 10.1, off-street parking and loading regulations, and Table 10.3, off-street parking regulations. Proposed finding states, the planning board finds that the on-site parking meets the minimum requirements for the use. The board finds that the parking, including angled spaces on Northampton Street, sign plan, and painted directional markings on the pavement will provide adequate direction to vehicles navigating the site to access via Northampton Street and exit via Mountain View Road. This arrangement will be subject to review as part of the Q plan to ensure that all efforts are employed to discourage site traffic departing onto Northampton Street or the adjoining parcels. The planning board will review and approve the adequacy of the Q plan at a public meeting after 60 days. Said meeting shall include notice to abutters mailed by the applicant in accordance with Chapter 40A, Section 9. This meeting will consider the adequacy of parking on site should any issues arise in the first 60 days of site operation as a cannabis retail facility. Waivers. The applicant shall be required to submit specific information regarding any waivers from 935 CMR 500 granted by the Commission. The Planning Board shall approve or disapprove said waivers based on the following Commission criteria in 935 CMR 500. Proposed finding states, the Planning Board found that any waivers from the CCC should be reviewed and approved by the Planning Board during a public meeting. Notice of enforcement order. Within 24 hours of receipt of notice of it, a cannabis establishment shall file with the mayor, health agent, and the building commissioner any summary cease and desist order, quarantine order, suspension order, revocation order limiting sales, deficiency statement, plan of correction, notice of a hearing, notice of any other administrative process or legal action, denial of a license, denial or renewal of a license, or final action issued by a state agency, including but not limited to the Commission and Massachusetts Department of Public Health, regarding the cannabis establishment, the Cannabis Control Commission license, or the Department of Public Health certificate of registration. Proposed finding states that the decision includes a condition requiring that the applicant shall provide notice to the city of any enforcement order issued by a state agency in accordance with section 10.10.7.12 of the zoning ordinance. Annual inspection. Any operating cannabis establishment within the city shall be inspected annually by the building inspector or their designees to ensure compliance with this section and with any conditions imposed by the planning board as a condition of the special permit approval. Proposed finding states, the decision includes a condition requiring that the applicant shall coordinate and arrange an annual inspection with the building inspector each year. Said inspection should occur within a reasonable period of time of each anniversary of the first day of operation. Next, section 10.5, commercial development performance standards of the Easthampton zoning ordinance. First, no parking shall be permitted within the required front yard setback of a structure if the physical configuration of the lot creates a hardship for the property owner to meet this requirement. The planning board may allow parking in the front with adequate screening as noted in section 10.515B. Proposed finding states, the board found that the applicant provided vegetative buffering to provide adequate screening for parking spaces proposed in the front setback, and as such granted a waiver to allow parking in the front setback per 10.511A in the Easthampton zoning ordinance. Next, to the extent feasible, parking areas shall be shared with adjacent businesses. Proposed finding states, the board found that as the site offers abundant parking for operation and peak traffic, and that the site includes multiple parcels with no interior division and multiple curb cuts, shared parking and free interparcel access was to be discouraged. Next, for developments which make a long-term commitment to actively promote employee and public use of transit, ride sharing, and other means to reduce single occupant vehicle trips, minimum parking standards may be reduced by a percentage up to a maximum of 20% to be determined by the planning board based upon the adequacy of trip reduction plans submitted in accordance with section 10.524. Proposed finding states, no trip reduction plan was proposed by the applicant to reduce required parking spaces for the project. Next, architectural design shall be compatible with the character and scale of buildings in the city. Proposed finding states, the board found that as an adaptive reuse of an existing commercial building, the project as proposed conforms to the prevailing architectural style and scale of the city and the highway business zone in which it falls. Next, any outdoor lighting fixture newly installed or replaced shall be shielded so that it does not produce a strong direct light beyond the property boundaries. Proposed finding states, the board found that proposed lighting, including new lights and extant pole mount fixtures in the parking area and building mounted security lights, did not impose any light spillage beyond the property boundaries. Next, no light standard shall be taller than 15 feet. Proposed finding states, the board found that the applicant did not propose any new lighting higher than 15 feet. Curb cuts. Curb cuts shall be limited to the minimum width for safe entering and exiting and shall in no case exceed 24 feet in width per lane. Proposed finding states, per the applicant's submitted plan, sheet A4, proposed site plan, the existing access curb cut to the site from Northampton Street is approximately 19 feet in width. All driveways shall be designed to afford motorists existing to highway exiting to highways, I got a typo there, Curtis, I think, with safe sight distance. Proposed finding states, the board found that per the traffic statement prepared by McMahon Associates dated September 11th, 2020, motorists were provided with ample sight distance to effect safe exits from the site via Mountain Road.
I'll change that to exiting to highways. I agree, that's a typo.
Thank you. Adequate pedestrian and bicycle access shall be provided as follows. Sidewalks shall be provided to enable pedestrian access to adjacent properties and between individual businesses within a development. The appropriate authority may waive this requirement in a case where such action is in the public interest and not inconsistent with the purposes stated in section 12.7 and 12.9. The appropriate authority for by right uses is the building inspector. For uses by special permit or site plan approval, the appropriate authority is the planning board. Proposed finding states, the board found that the applicant provided adequate means of pedestrian and bicycle access, granting that the predominant mode of conveyance for visitors to the site will be automotive traffic on Northampton Street. Large parking areas shall be subdivided with landscaped islands so that no paved parking service shall extend more than 80 feet in width. At least one tree, minimum 2-inch caliper, per 35 parking spaces shall be provided within the area. Proposed finding states, the board found that the pre-existing site for the proposed development did not include areas of paved surface greater than 80 feet in width, and as such did not require landscaped islands to subdivide the area of asphalt. Exposed storage areas, machinery, service areas, truck loading areas, utility buildings, and structures and other unsightly uses shall be screened from view from neighboring properties and streets using dense, hardy evergreen plantings or earthen berms or wall or tight fence complemented by evergreen plantings. Evergreen plants must be at least 2 feet tall at planting with the capacity to grow to full screening of the unsightly use. Plantings must be 4 feet at planting when abutting a residential zone. Proposed finding states, that should say board, Curtis. The board found that the applicant provided adequate means to screen the only exterior utility element proposed for the project, a bulk waste receptacle, in the form of a fenced enclosure and plantings to screen the site as a whole from Northampton Street and abutting properties. The site does not abut a residential area. Next, all landscaped areas shall be properly maintained. Shrubs or trees which die shall be replaced within one growing season. Proposed finding states, the board conditioned that the site and associated plantings be maintained to the above standard. Next, the number of curb cuts on state and local roads shall be minimized. The board found that proposed finding states that the board found that the applicant did not propose any additional curb cuts and limited the use of other curb cuts to access the site by means of physical barriers to prevent free access to and from adjoining parcels with distinct curb cuts on Northampton Street. A landscaped buffer strip at least 15 feet wide, continuous except for approved driveways, shall be established adjacent to any public road to visually separate parking and other uses from the road. The buffer strip shall be planted with grass, medium height shrubs, and shade trees, minimum 2-inch caliper, planted at least every 50 feet along the road frontage. At all street or driveway intersections, trees or shrubs shall be set back a sufficient distance from such intersections so that they do not present a traffic visibility hazard. The sidewalk required in section 10.514C1 shall be incorporated into the buffer strip. Proposed finding states, the board found that as the proposed project involves redevelopment of an existing and under-maintained site, the applicant's proposal to place and maintain plantings adjacent to Northampton Road was sufficient to visually separate the site from the road. A traffic impact statement shall be prepared which shall contain traffic flow patterns at the site, including entrances and egresses, loading and unloading areas, and curb cuts on site and within 100 feet of the site, and a detailed assessment of the traffic safety impacts of the proposed project or use on the carrying capacity of any adjacent highway or road, including the projected number of motor vehicle trips to enter or depart from the site estimated for daily hour and peak hour traffic levels, road capacities, and impacts on intersections. Proposed finding states, the board found that the applicant met this condition by submitting traffic statements prepared by McMahon Associates dated September 11th, 2020.
I have to add an A.
Yes, thank you. Adequate pedestrian and bicycle access shall be provided as follows. A sidewalk shall be provided to provide access to adjacent properties and between individual businesses within a development. Proposed finding states, the board found that as there are no adjacent buildings in use and no extant sidewalk, that the applicant satisfies this condition as is for pedestrian circulation interior to the proposed site. An additional traffic impact statement shall be prepared by projects over 10,000 square feet, which shall contain a plan to minimize traffic and safety impacts through such means as physical design and layout concepts, staggered employee work schedules, promoting use of public transit or carpooling or other appropriate means, and an interior traffic and pedestrian circulation plan designed to minimize conflicts and safety problems. Proposed finding states the board found that as this project did not exceed 10,000 square feet, it did not require additional traffic plans. And finally, trip reduction plan. Proposed finding states the board found that the proposed project did not constitute a new building or use of more than 10,000 square feet, and as such did not require a trip reduction plan.
Need a feet there.
And then we have a few conditions that we've discussed. So first of all is all interior and exterior improvements, including the parking and traffic management on the adjacent parcel, shall be constructed and maintained substantially in accordance with the approved plans prepared by Uncommon Architectural Places, last revised on December 14th, 2020, and shall be completed prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy. In any event that any exterior changes cannot be completed prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, an alternative schedule shall be reviewed and approved by the board at a public meeting. The occupancy limits of the retail space shall be strictly enforced by the owner. In addition, the owner shall actively manage the exterior of the property and patrons to prevent the gathering, loitering, or line queuing on any public sidewalk. Next, any change in ownership which is subject to review and/or approval by the Cannabis Control Commission shall appear before the planning board prior to operations to acknowledge the existing conditions of the permit and compliance therewith or changes thereto. A purpose of the public meeting shall be for the planning board to recognize the new ownership and determine if any change is significant enough to require a modification of the special permit subject to a public hearing. The cannabis establishment shall operate in accordance with an approved operating plan, opening plan for the management of patrons, parking, and security. Initially, the use shall operate in accordance with the plan approved on December 15th, 2020, including for the first 60 days of operation as proposed by the applicant. Said plan shall be reviewed by the planning board 60 days after opening with input from the chief of police and/or other relevant city officials, at which point an additional interim and/or a final plan shall be reviewed and approved by the planning board for operations thereafter. Any changes that significantly alter the general operation, significant changes to the interior floor plan, or changes that may significantly alter the nature of patron management shall be presented to the planning board at a public meeting. The purpose of the public meeting shall be for the planning board to determine if the change is significant enough to require a modification of the special permit subject to a public hearing. The cannabis establishment shall not create a nuisance situation pursuant to the definition of nuisance under section 10.10.5.7 of the zoning ordinance. The special permit associated with the use is contingent upon continuous licensure by the Cannabis Control Commission. The hours of operation of the retail dispensary shall be from, and it says 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days per week, but we'll change that to the hours allowed by zoning ordinance. All signs shall comply with section 10.0 of the zoning ordinance. A-frame signs and temporary signs on the adjacent property shall not be calculated as part of the subject property. Any waivers granted by the Cannabis Control Commission associated with the operation shall be reviewed and approved by the planning board prior to implementation, except for any waiver granted for the sale of marijuana products tested by the Department of Public Health rather than the Cannabis Control Commission. And finally, the applicant shall provide notice to the city of any enforcement order issued by a state agency in accordance with section 10.10.7.11 of the zoning ordinance and shall coordinate and arrange an annual inspection with the building inspector each year from the date of opening in accordance with section 10.10.7.12.
Jesse, I'd like to commend you. That was a tough, long read. You didn't stumble once. It went on past 20 minutes. You did real well.
Thank you, James. That's what I'm here for, the accolades on my public reading.
Would you like a motion?
I just want to check in with the applicant and see if there was anything in there that caused you concern or had any questions or comments about before we vote on the actual application.
No, I don't.
That also, the conditions, everything seems doable, Scott?
Yes, correct.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay, then yes, I will take a motion.
I motion to approve the special permit for Apical Inc. for a recreational cannabis retail establishment located at 102 Northampton Street with the aforementioned conditions and the grammatical modifications noted during the reading of the draft by Jesse Belchertown.
I'll second that.
All right, voting to approve the special permit for Apical. Brenda.
Aye.
Harry.
Aye.
James.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
And I am an aye. Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Very much.
Good luck, Kat.
Yes.
So actually, I'm so sorry. While we're still on the call, I know this is such a killjoy thing to ask. What is there a mechanism we want to specifically mention now for the 60-day Q plan thing? Like, should I just get in touch when the site opens up in April?
Yeah, because they're gonna. I mean, their plan is to open in April, but we don't know exactly when that is. So
And that's a question from me not having done it before. Like I'm going.
So I mean, I don't think. I think we've decided not to set a date for that review now because they may be able to open earlier. They may open in May, and that way they don't have to come back if they don't need to.
So, Cot et al., if you want to just email the planning department or myself, as you guys look to open up, we'll start the clock on that 60 days of your Q plan so that we can review and revise down if it turns out to be overkill for the kind of traffic you have starting up. Okay?
Okay, that sounds great.
And similarly, I know we discussed this before. If y'all do any substantial changes due to COVID, just feel free to get in touch with us and we'll come back before the board.
Yes, sure thing.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. Moving right along, we have, we're not even that late, to a joint public hearing with the City Council Ordinance Subcommittee to discuss amending Section 10.10.5.4 hours to allow adult use cannabis retailers to open earlier than 10 a.m. And I see some city councilors here. Perfect. So I don't know, do you guys need to open your hearing or how do you?
Sure. Yeah, I'll move to open up our portion of the joint public hearing. All right, I think that was the second. So all in favor, Tom?
Aye.
And aye, so we're good.
Excellent. So do you guys want to just explain, it seems pretty obvious on its face, but how we got here and what's being proposed?
So this is a request from one of the cannabis dispensaries in Easthampton to try to stay competitive with dispensaries in other communities that are opening at 8 o'clock. And so basically, in order to stay competitive, it was a request that we take a look at this.
And so is this something that's sort of universally done in the adjoining towns? Or some are and some aren't?
It's kind of all over the place, honestly. There's a couple in Northampton that are opening at 8 and there's a couple that open at 9. And then it's kind of between 8 and 10, for dispensaries in the area, which is about the same for liquor stores as well.
Okay. Jim, yeah.
Right off the bat, it seems pretty clear to me that there's just no reason between the hours of 8 and 10 it should have no effect on anything at all. I can't think of any good reason why we would cause delay. Interfere with competition is not something the planning board does. I think that there's no legitimate reason I can think of, and I'm all ears for someone that has a legitimate reason that opening at 8 will change things from 10.
Any other questions or comments from planning board members?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions. Curtis, I just sent you something. Are you able to share that?
Yes. Give me a second again, will you? Sorry.
Yeah. So I was trying to understand the scope of the problem. So I did a little research on the hours of nearby businesses, and it seems. I'm guessing it's INSA concerned about Netta. Netta's the only one that opens at 8 a.m., including others in Northampton. So even the other ones in Northampton that can open at 8 a.m. are choosing not to. So I just thought this was really kind of interesting. So I don't know. I just wanted, at first I thought it was a no-brainer, but then I started to look at it and it's like, I watched the videos from the several hours of conversation about this ordinance in 2018. And it said that the 10 a.m. was done as a concession to, all the people who went to the public hearing from the schools. So I just was wondering what has changed between now and then. And if you look at the total hours of operation, I mean, INSA is open 91 hours. Net is open 98 hours. I just wonder about this. So if, you know, Holyoke, I mean, I think Holyoke's going to have like 20 or 30 of these. If they approve 24-hour cannabis, I mean, like, where is this going? So I just wanted to have a little more discussion, really out of respect of all those people that were concerned about the 8 a.m. time frame to begin with. I also looked at the package stores, and none of them open at 8 a.m. The Union package store is 10 a.m. to 11 p.m. So I don't know. I just wanted to have more discussion out of respect to all those people that came to the other meeting that, I mean, they probably don't know about this meeting. And so for those of you who participated in this 2 years ago, can you recall their concerns? Or, you know, I wanted us to just think about it a little bit more out of deference to why the 10 a.m. was set in the first place.
Yeah, Jim?
Not to repeat, I just want to pick up on one piece that Brenda said there that stuck with me is that, and I think it's really relevant, and I appreciate your going back and getting that information. It's actually jogging my memory that those people aren't here or probably don't know about this. And I just wanted to ask about process for Salem and Tom. We're going to discuss this, and then this would go to City Council for review. There will be, even if we were to decide immediately here as a group, this doesn't decide it. It goes to another piece where people could have an opportunity to speak and respond. Is that correct?
We would have to have a public hearing at the full council.
Okay. I just want to be assured of that. Brenda, that was a great point. I'm sorry.
And that public hearing would be advertised in the paper and all the stuff that normal public hearings do.
Brenda, just getting to the substance of yours, speaking for myself, I mean, I think, what has changed since we started drafting this bylaw is, like, in the world of cannabis in Massachusetts, pretty much everything, right? Those were, if you watched those hearings, you probably remember better than any of us who already blacked that out. But there was a lot going on. I tend to agree with James's thought that 8 to 10 is a pretty safe window for something where I don't see where the concerns are. I would definitely have more qualms about later at night or even much earlier in the morning. So I think, like, to your scenario of 24 hours, I mean, to me, that's a much different situation. And I think it's possible that some of these places on the list, like we just said when we were talking with the last applicant, you know, the fact that you're entitled to open up at 8 doesn't mean you necessarily want to. And so this may be something that people choose not to do, or some do and some don't. I don't know that the 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. window in the morning gives me much concern for something like this. I think that it's sort of in line with similar businesses and what they're doing, even comparing it to, you know, the CVS pharmacy and places like that. So to me, the 8 to 10 in the morning is not a window that gives me particular concern, but it doesn't mean that other people don't have reasons that they would have pause for that.
I know that in Holyoke that there's an earlier start time. I think it's 8, and that neither Canna Provisions nor Boston Bud have been operating on it. I'm not surprised with Boston Bud, as it's a little off the beaten track. It's on Sargent Street, but Canna Provisions is pretty centrally located and gets pretty brisk business throughout all parts of the day, and even they haven't been opening substantially early. So the framework of legalization did not create like an arms race to open earlier in Holyoke, which does have substantially large numbers of marijuana businesses coming online in 2021.
Interesting, Curtis. Tom?
I haven't gone back and watched the videos, and Brenda, I admire you going through all those hours of that stuff. But I do think that, like, there was this sense at the time that there was going to be a situation where there was going to be lots of school-aged children who were going to be walking by these things while there were these enormous queues of people outside, and that somehow the children coming across these cannabis customers would destroy their morality, just something. I just, from what I've seen, I just haven't seen that kind of situation, like first of all, like there's only one of these places downtown, and I've never seen like a line out the door really, and I drive by there pretty often. I'm not sure that at 8 a.m. there's like the sort of situations with either traffic or queues or anything like that people had envisioned. Like it just hasn't materialized. And as more and more places come online, I just don't see that demand like skyrocketing. I don't see like next year being the year where suddenly there's huge lines all over the place for these establishments. So for me, like whatever concern was there, I feel like I wasn't concerned about it back then, and I'm less concerned about it today.
Thanks, Tom. James?
Once again, I just want to add on to that a little bit. You're bringing up memories, Maple School, and of course the new school that's coming in. The fact that that business, it's been referred to as the Bermuda Triangle of Easthampton, where we have our bars and such in that area. And the proximity of Maple School was a big part of the discussions back then, as I recall. I mean, it was a while ago. And with that moving, that also alleviates a big piece of that concern. That was well said, Tom. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from Jeff? Yeah.
Sorry, I think I'm like Brenda's chart is really useful, and I appreciate that because that's the kind of stuff that I wish I had some time to do. So I think it's very informative. The only question about it, and it was something I guess Curtis said that might add to that chart, is if the community zoning allows earlier operation and there's a choice that they might make to not. So it sounded like, and Curtis was was working in Holyoke before he worked.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So that would be the only additional potential piece of information in that.
In Holyoke, I think it's already 8 to 10 or 8 to midnight, and it was specifically designed to have a carve out also for industrial uses to operate on an industrial schedule. So presumably cultivation could be 24 hours in Holyoke, and we've not seen Canna Provisions nor Boston Bud, which are the two open ones right in the downtown area, take advantage of it.
And just for clarification, right now the hours of operation really are just applicable to the retail. I mean, we didn't really set any for cultivation. All right, so that's all. I mean, I appreciate all that research right there. It's a lot.
Any other comments or questions from either planning board or city council? James?
One more, Jesse. In terms of what we would do here, are we going to vote to make a recommendation? Should we decide that that's what we want to do, to send to the city council? Is that what our goal is here?
Yeah, I think we recommend the proposed change to the city council for their consideration or something to that effect.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from city council or planning board? Any comments or questions from the public? You can either raise your Zoom hand or your real hand. David Kinstall, if you want to unmute yourself and just give us your...
My name is David Kinstall, Kingsbury Way. I think some of the things in terms of like a safety issue, when you look at in terms of alcohol, like it's not the same compared to other stuff. It's not a Hallmark greeting store. It's going to be selling greeting cards at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. People who are going to be buying it are going to be consuming it. And so how much extra early morning cannabis consumption while you have school buses running around, while you have people driving around, how much more of that do you want going on between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock for people who need to buy it before and consume it before work? They can't wait until after work. So I know there's some different issues on it and maybe they want to do, but I do see some logic behind having a delay until 10 o'clock.
Thanks, David. Any other comments or questions from the public? Raise your Zoom hand. If your camera's on, you can raise your actual hand, *9 on a cell phone, or if you need to, you can just unmute yourself and ask to address us.
Jesse, it's Steve Riley from INSA. I wasn't sure how to notify you if I wanted to say something.
Thanks, Steve. Feel free. You've got the floor.
Sure. So we support this request. Essentially, what we're seeking is an earlier opening time. We just recently opened our Salem facility at 7 a.m. What we've seen is that it has been something that the customers we have wanted, particularly with the earlier closing time now with Governor Baker's recent executive order. So we've done fairly well from that 7 to 9 area. We feel it gives us a competitive advantage with other locations. The other important part of this is that we also sell medical products. So we've got medical patients that are limited as well. So, we just think offering that earlier time would be beneficial. We haven't seen any public safety issues at our facility. In fact, the statistics show that the crime in the area has gone down since we've been operating. So we think an earlier opening time is not going to invite any new kind of issues, just based on what the track record is to date.
Thanks, Steve. Jim?
Do you mind if I ask a question, Steve? There was a comment made.
Yes, Jim. Sorry, I had you on mute.
By Mr. Kinsel, and I'm grateful for the feedback, that people are consuming. If they're going to be consuming already at 10 o'clock there, that consuming at 8 o'clock is a problem. What I was told in these meetings and in follow-ups is that you have videos, you don't allow consumption on site. There is no consumption happening at your location, not in the parking lot, not afterwards. Once they're out of your site, you don't know what's going on, but you're watching them. There's a camera on the cars coming in. Is that true? Have you seen consumption in the cars? Do you have any evidence of that?
We've seen none. I mean, we don't have any evidence of that. We have on-site security as well as the cameras, so we haven't. It's part of our policies and procedures to go out and basically conduct a sweep of the parking lot periodically throughout the day. So obviously that would also include the earlier hours, and it's one of the things our security staff looks for, because it's the biggest complaint we could receive, and certainly would become a risk for our license. So we really work diligently to patrol the parking lot, use the security implements that we have there, and we have a lot. That facility is close to 300 cameras at this point, and there's pretty much no point when you come near in so that you're not on camera. So, we're proud of the track record that we have there. We haven't seen issues. Based on our experience in Salem, we don't anticipate that the earlier times are going to generate issues, but we think that it'll be something that'll help not just INSA, but any business in Easthampton, any cannabis business in Easthampton, because ultimately this business is going to become a lot of municipalities competing for attention from consumers, and an earlier start time does put Easthampton and the businesses in Easthampton at a competitive advantage to some other locations.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the public, planning board, city councilors, planning department? Again, if you're calling in on a phone, you can do *9 to raise your virtual hand, or again, just to unmute yourself and ask to address us. All right, I don't see anything.
Ready for a motion?
Sure.
Motion to recommend to City Council from the Planning Board to amend Section 10.10.5.4 to allow adult use cannabis retailers to open at, it says earlier than 10 a.m. on our agenda, but I think we're speaking specifically about 8 a.m., so I'm going to say 8 a.m.
I will second that.
All right, so to recommend the change in the bylaw for start time at 8 a.m. Brenda?
No.
James?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Harry?
Aye.
Austin? You were muted there, but I think that was an aye.
Yeah.
Still no sound. Try thumbs up.
Yes.
Aye.
Thank you. Harry?
Did you already get him?
I already gave an aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. And I am an aye. You only get one vote, Harry. My bad. Did I miss someone else? No, I got everybody. Okay. All right. Tom and Salem, do you guys need to do anything, or are you done?
We don't need to do anything tonight. So we look forward to the written recommendation.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Appreciate it. All right.
All right. Moving right along and right on schedule.
Can I ask a process question about that?
Yeah, sure.
So when the recommendation gets written, can I submit like a minority report like the ordinance committee does? I mean, it wasn't unanimous. I think it's important that the city council hears the minority opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it's a public hearing, right? So I mean, any of us can go and express our opinions. We've never done like a planning board minority report, but I don't see any reason why you can't. I mean, you certainly can submit something in writing as Brenda and why I voted no or why I'm against the proposed change.
Okay, well.
I may be speaking out of turn. Hold on, Jeff, why are you raising your hand?
I want to support the idea for sure, but the only process related question is the report, is based on what just happened in the public hearing. So, my responsibility is I could be a little bit more thorough, especially since this was kind of concise. In the report, I think I can identify the concerns that you raised, the questions that you raised. And I just worry that the minority report, because we haven't done this before, so I'm just trying to talk it through. I think it would be, I want to talk through the idea of you adding a lot more that didn't come up during the public hearing. I think the only other mechanical, like the process question would be to have continued this joint public hearing so that you can provide all of the people with more information. That's my only question, Jesse, is
but Jeff,
Brenda is just gathering more information after we just closed the public hearing.
Yeah, but she's not trying to convince planning board members to change their votes. She's trying to convince city councilors to vote in accordance with her feelings. And so I think she can submit I don't think she's contemplating you preparing something, Jeff. I think anybody can submit a letter pro or con or indifferent to the city council or appear in person at the public hearing.
I recognize this may not be salient, Jeff, but we had the same exact thing happen in Holyoke, where we had a minority dissent also issued to the planning board. I can pull up that also issued to the city council based on a joint hearing like this. I can pull up what happened there. It was now Chair Panich who was the dissenter, so I still have those records kicking around just as like what a different town did.
Yeah, and when we went through the cannabis stuff, there was plenty of council members that were coming with different opinions to our meetings and sharing their name and where they came from, the city council. So I can't imagine why Brenda couldn't come to a city council meeting and share her opinions as a planning board member.
I think it's way more efficient, Brenda, if you're the one doing it instead of having to deal with the planning department. I think if you draft something and submit it or show up.
Well, all right. I did attend a city council meeting and I did speak up, and then I was I was reprimanded a little bit because there was confusion apparently by, I'm assuming, city administrators or city councilors as to who was I speaking for, the planning board or myself personally. But I did watch those videos, and the city councilors did get up and speak, and they all introduced themselves as city councilors, and they didn't say, I'm a city councilor, but I'm only speaking for myself. So I just need more clarification.
I think you can participate in the public hearing, especially where you're not, this one is clear, right? Because you voted against this. I think the only time confusion comes up is if there's a planning board member in this scenario who's there either speaking or answering questions about planning board action, where it's not necessarily something that was voted on. But for this, I think you can appear and explain exactly, I think you can say things that you didn't even say tonight. You can bring whatever you want to that city council hearing.
Okay, do I have to give a disclaimer that I'm not representing the planning board, or I can say, the vote was 5-1, I was the dissenting vote, and I'd like to share my thoughts?
Yeah, I think the fact that there was one vote against and you're there speaking against it makes it pretty clear that you're not speaking on behalf of the whole planning board. This is a pretty obvious one.
Okay.
I generally, if I speak in public about something that the planning board has done, I will specify that I'm speaking for myself only and not the planning board. But I think that's just sort of a general way to start any comment. But I think you can say whatever you think is important.
Okay, great. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Jesse, just before you go too far, we need to close our portion of the public hearing. So I'm going to move that the City Council Ordinance Committee closes our portion of the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. In favor, Tom? Yes or no?
Wait, just raising his hand.
Oh, I missed it. Sorry.
It has nothing to do with ordinance closing your public hearing. It's just this process question is a good one. The thing that I just want to articulate a different way, I guess, is, we'll be seeing other zoning amendments come forward. and they will not be as straightforward as this, even though that there's questions and things that Member Salyer can bring to the table. My request, though, is there could be information that comes forward later that would be beneficial for everyone, the planning board in particular, to have had and used in part of the deliberation. Whether this may not be the case, this may not be the proposal that warrants it, but I want to make sure that going forward, I want the planning board to have all the information that is available at that time to consider. So especially as we get into like a meatier subject or more challenging subject, I would be more inclined to have requested a continuation so that if there is additional information that can be brought to this joint public hearings, it's pretty important to work out details. So again, it's not necessarily pertinent to this one, but moving forward, I just want everyone to know that I would be more inclined to have this hearing continued so that we can bring more information to the table to make sure that it doesn't change the perspective of the planning board or the joint body of this hearing. So I'm just trying to think more ahead for future things that are more complicated. I wouldn't want it to get punted and then have a bunch of new information come later that the planning board didn't have or couldn't consider. So sorry, it's just a future.
I think there's always the potential for more information, but let's let Salem and Tom vote and leave if they want to.
Tom, how do you vote?
Aye.
I vote aye too. Our section of the joint public hearing is closed. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night. Thank you.
You too.
Have a good one.
All right. Brenda, do you feel like you understand sort of at least what you're comfortable saying, if you so choose?
I'll give it a whirl, and if I misstep, you can send me another email. I don't know what to say. I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to follow the rules. But I will say the prior issue about the cultivation on, Route 10, a lot of information came out during the process. And if we keep continuing, then how is it even going to get to the city council? I mean, I don't know. I think the cultivation issue, Jeff, was unique. I really, I don't know, maybe there's more big complicated things headed our way that you know about. But yeah, I mean, Jesse, I think I understand what you said, and, I'm totally comfortable going and saying I was the minority person, and I just wanted to express for myself what my thinking was. And I mean, I don't really have any more information. Just
I think that's totally appropriate. I think that's totally appropriate. And I agree that, I think there's definitely going to be times when new information comes out after we make our recommendation. And if it comes out before the city council votes, then maybe it changes their mind. And if it comes out after, it wouldn't be the first time that we passed a bylaw, in Massachusetts without complete information. But
right. I mean, I think everybody's doing the best they can and acting, with integrity and honesty. It's just, you don't know what you don't know. And just sometimes things unfold in strange ways. So.
Yep. I think that makes sense. Jim, did you have something else you wanted to add?
I love the approach you're going with this, but I do think it's a difficult issue, and I don't think it is clean cut. There's sort of an assumption here, and I think, Brenda, you're going to do it because you said you'd point out that you're the minority opinion. You'd say you're a member of the planning board, but you're not representing the view of the majority of the planning board. That, for me, is the key in this. If I were to go before a meeting and just happen to be the sole planning board member that showed up to something that I voted against, which has happened, it's happened fast, and I were to say, my name is James Zarvis, and I'm of the planning board, and I think this is a terrible idea. I have a problem with that. I think that misrepresents you. I think that misrepresents me as being the voice of the planning board. And I think we need some process to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think that, and Brenda, you and I have talked about that. I think it's just a matter of clearing up any confusion, that it's hard that sometimes people, even if you don't say you're from the planning board, people know who's on the planning board, right? So I think as long as you say out of the gate, I'm a member of the planning board, I'm here, just representing my own personal opinions, you're still a resident of Easthampton. You're entitled to share your opinions and go to a public hearing. I think that's fine. All right, excellent. Moving along to the last item on our agenda, the continued public hearing for American Dream Realty LLC, seeking a special permit and stormwater management permit under section 12.7 for a drive-through restaurant, Dunkin' restaurant, located at 5 and 9 East Street in the Highway Business District. Is there someone here tonight from the applicant? Jessica, I see you. How are you?
Rob's coming in right now as well. I'm sorry, not to cut off Jessica. You're just. So.
I can't hear you, Jessica, for some reason. I see your.
There we go.
There.
Rob is bouncing from multiple meetings, so he may be in and out.
Okay.
Just forewarning.
Right.
So I'm here from R. Livick Associates. I'm representing the applicant American Dream Realty LLC for the proposed drive-through facility. We submitted a number of documents to the board for your review last week. I think what I'd like to do, if it's amenable to the board, is maybe start with the site plans and just review what the minor modifications were to the site plans, then jump over to the architecturals, take a look at the updated renderings and that information, then go to the sign plan, and then deal with the traffic last.
Sounds great.
Does that sound amenable?
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you, Jessica.
Okay. So do I have control or the ability to have control?
You should. You are co-host, so you should be able. You should be able to screen share.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Does everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So just as a point of reference, I do have the last plan set that was submitted as a comparison just to help us walk through the changes. We did detail all of the changes in the cover letter, but I think it's beneficial to walk through it so that everybody has the benefit of seeing it visually as well as also in text. So there were two key revisions. One had to do with the footprint itself, which was updated to reflect the updated architectural style that was requested from the board. And the other was to address fire department requirements that they had submitted through the planning department to revise this entryway here. So I'm going to walk through how those two different elements have modified the site plans. So first, in terms of the footprint itself, going back to the old plan set, you see it was just a straight square. This one, the walk-in cooler has been removed from the interior and placed in this back area. And then this also represents the vestibule. So between these two modifications, it did have some impact of the surrounding site design, and I'll walk through those one by one. Just to note that the square footage of the building increased by 7 square feet between this footprint, which was 1872, and this one, which is 1879, when you combine the walk-in cooler with the rest of the drive-through facility. So as a result, the front sidewalk is now 8 feet in this location, where previously it was 6. You see the difference there. The handicap parking has shifted closer to the entryway as a result of the addition of the vestibule. So in the last set, the handicap parking was located here. It has now been modified and shifted down here, and you'll see that there are ramps to bring folks into the entryway of the facility. The 2 parking spots here have slightly moved. It's almost hard to see the change. Oh no, did I just close everything else? Hold on.
You're good.
Please.
You're good. You're good.
All of my prep work, having everything up, was closed.
I still see 3 tabs.
You do?
I still see 3 tabs.
It looks like you're still on
okay.
there.
I see what happened. It got pulled out. Aha. Hold on. There we go. Now we're digging where there's taters. Okay. So the parking spaces in the back here. So because of the walk-in cooler, there has been the shift here. So you see that there was more pedestrian space here, but that has been shifted. So that is the slight modification due to the walk-in cooler. I'm going to jump to the utility. Actually, before I jump to the utility, because it's on a different sheet, let's stick with the entryway for right now. So you can see that this is the old version. This is the new version. It's been straightened out. I think important to note that the width of the driveway has increased to 40 feet. It was previously 30 feet. And you'll also know that there was only one lane here in the previous version. Now we've got 2 lanes, one taking a left turn and one for a right turn. So with the addition of the 10 feet of the driveway, we now have 2 drive aisles coming out. And there has been some paint modifications as well. Located right there. Let's see, yep, the entryway paint and then the grading. So the grading to the driveway entrance is also modified very slightly, not a huge change, but as a result of that shift. And if I jump down to the utility page, just give me 1 minute. So the gas and water line have been sure. Yep, the gas and electric, sorry. So here's the overhead electric line here, and the gas was coming in here in the original version. Now, because of the addition of the walk-in cooler, they're being run along the side of the building and tying into the back. So that's the modification on the utility plan. I believe that is it for all of the modifications on the utility plan. Does anybody have any direct questions about that right now?
Planning board members or planning department, any questions about the changes to the site plan? All right, you may proceed. Excellent.
Let's close those down. All right. Okay, so for the architectural plan, this is the detail. The walk-in cooler is this little section chunk back here. So that's the modification. And then with the vestibule, which has also been modified. This is the updated floor plan, which shows where the walk-in cooler is back here. The vestibule, the dining area, service area, back room. Not so quite in your jurisdiction, but worth looking at and noting. And then we have updated renderings. So we worked with the architects to make sure that the vegetation was updated. It does meet the landscape plan. I do want to also note that there is a couple things here. One, you'll see these sort of shaded buildings. This is the existing shed. And these are the existing trees that are on the neighbor's property. So those will be still in place. The height of the retaining wall has been confirmed, and that is accurate on these renderings. We also have the addition here. This is the housing across the street. Again, just as more of a scale so that you can see it in relation to the proposed facility. We also have the pump station here as well. So these are all really just to provide some scale and some context. But I know there was a question regarding the height of the retaining wall, and that is all accurate and correct in these renderings, and we've made sure of that.
Jessica, excuse me, I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. That building in the distance that's sort of translucent, that's indicating neighbors' buildings. That's not a part.
That's right.
I see there's like a Dunkin' sign in there, which confused me a little bit.
Oh, this is in front of it. So yeah, these are just really to provide some context into the relation to the neighboring properties. So this is the shed next door. This is the proposed wood fence. And then the shed is behind that. And then these are the existing trees that are on that location.
Quick question on the other view that you shared, and it looks like that this rendering shows a significant amount of existing vegetation removed behind the pump station. Is that proposed, or is that just not shown in this plan?
I don't think it's just shown in this plan. I think I might have missed that when I was working with the architects in terms of that vegetation.
Yeah, it's just existing on, probably not even on your property. It's just,
right.
Random growing, it's nothing of importance as vegetation is concerned, but I didn't know if that was the view that people were going to see, or they're going to basically see, 15-foot tall scrub brush in front of your building instead.
We can go back to the plan, and we can look at the demolition plan, and that would provide some. sure I get the right set. Here we go.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to also make sure that there's no removal along the bike path either, which your plan kind of shows.
So this is existing conditions. Hold on one sec. Okay, demolition and removals plan. So it is showing that it is going to be removing the hedgerow.
Oh, okay. And also, yeah, it looks like there will be a lot of that shrubbery I'm thinking about along the bike path is beyond your property, so that'll be open on that side as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Any questions about this material that was submitted?
Good. I had one question about the site plan. In the proposed area, can you just describe? So at the rear, we at the rear of the property, we had previously talked about, the bike path, parking, and a walkway and access, and that's no longer there. But can you describe what the gap in the wall does, where those elevations are shown, where there's no wall in the back? Can you just describe that verbally, what that is?
Maybe Rob might be able to jump in on that. I'm not sure on the design on that, if he's still on. Nope, he had to go. I believe it may have had to do with potentially for the drainage aspect, but I'm not exactly sure. There was also, I think, discussions, if I'm remembering correctly, like that if people were to come up or cut through, that could have been a potential cut through place for them. But I don't think that's the intent of it. I think it had to do with drainage.
That would be a concern for me.
But when Rob, I'll text him right now and see if he can jump back in.
Yeah, that would be a
might be
concern to
able
me
to answer that.
That assumes that stormwater is going off site.
Yeah, I don't think so. Let me ask him to jump back in. But in the meantime, we can continue on.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine the right answer, ding ding ding, would be potential future walkway to the bike path. That came up at some point in the discussion.
Yeah, but I think that was further back in the route there. I thought it was on the other corner there, if I remember right. There was a bike path all the way to the right of that wall.
Yeah, okay. So we can get clarification. I agree with Member Cockshaw, though, that would be a little bit of a problem if that was intended for drainage. So
yeah, I don't think it was. It may have been just to provide an additional cut through for people to cut through, but it's not exactly the safest place for people to be walking through either.
No,
so that's why I want to get his clarification on it. So so let's hold off on that. Let's make a note to come back to that, circle back when he's able to jump back on.
Great.
Okay. All right. Okay, any other questions about architectural renderings, site plan, or floor plan?
Looks good for now, Jessica.
All right, excellent. Okay, signage plan. So I don't believe this had been previously provided, so this was provided by the architect team. This, just to give you the lay of the land, and I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on this because I think it's fairly self-explanatory if you almost like follow the dots kind of thing. But these are all the key plan notes, and then these are the notes related to the plan itself. It does identify where there's going to be markings on the ground. It identifies the location of all of the proposed signage. There are details provided as well for all of the proposed infrastructure in relation to this, including the menu board, the speaker tower detail. And then on the second page, there are more details regarding the graphics. So that is all there and available for you to look at.
I have one, I guess, clarification question. A lot of so there's a bit of discrepancy on the plan views. This plan view right here with the arrow shows that kind of expanded island, I believe.
Yeah.
So I would just ask to when you do your final set on this to just clean that up so that we know exactly where those arrows are going to go.
Okay.
So that all the plan drawings match. That's just the engineer in me. I'm sorry.
Nope, that's fine. I get it.
It makes things clearer for the.
Yep.
Jessica, what about lighting on these signs? Are they illuminated internally or from the outside, and are they illuminated when the business is closed? How's that working?
It does say that they are internally illuminated on the details. I don't know what the standard practice is for signage and hours of operation in terms of when they go on and off. I know Manny is on the call and he's welcome to jump in and speak to that if he'd like. I don't know how he handles it at his other franchises.
Yes, Manny Sardinia. Good evening, everyone. Yes, the signs, it's usually on when the business is on and obviously off when the business are closed.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so that is signage and site plan and the elevations. I think now I'd like to turn it over to McMahon Associates to talk about the traffic, unless there's any other questions about the supplemental material that's been provided.
I think we're good for now, Jessica. Maybe after traffic, when we open it up to the public, there might be some about that material, but we can move on for now.
Sure, sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Jeff Bandini, McMahon Associates. We've made several presentations to the board already and submitted some additional material. Our original traffic study that we submitted at the outset of the project. So I'll just go over some of the material that we collected, since our last hearing, and then be happy to answer any questions from the board. So last time we presented, there was a request to collect some additional information regarding operations at the intersection of Route 5 at East Street. So one of the comments that we received was to compare traffic volumes when the Mountain Road was planned on being closed for utility and maintenance work. So given the timeline of the last hearing, we were able to collect that data, and we collected data the week after as well, so we could have some sort of level of comparison between, to give us some measure of difference between whether traffic was going to be significantly impacted by the closure of the Mountain Road or not. So our first, that was the first comparison that we made, and we found that the percent difference in the amount of traffic when the Mountain Road is closed and when it is not is only about 5%. So we also, going back and forth about some of our methodology with respect to the traffic study and the analysis software we use to evaluate the delay at the intersection, we went ahead and collected a gap acceptance study, which generally, we sent an engineer out in the field to measure what level of gaps the drivers at the East Street approach were taking. Were they being very conservative in terms of what they were taking for gaps? Were they taking chances which could potentially lead to safety deficiencies in the future? And we found that the gap acceptance was generally lower than what was taken, or what the general industry standard from the highway capacity manual tells us that the acceptable gap is. So generally what that tells us is that the analysis at the intersection that we used when we collected and submitted the original study was definitely on the conservative side, and that operations, given the smaller gap acceptance that folks are taking, lends the analysis to not show as much of a heavy delay as we previously noted in the study. And again, this is general field calibrated data, given the amount of, we like to look at field data because it gives us a sense of actual real world conditions. And, being in the Northeast and this sort of intersection with good sight lines and good geometry, it's understandable that there would be less gaps, shorter gaps accepted at this intersection. So we took that information and we compared it to our original volumes in the study. We generally found that the analysis has some sort of level of improvement based on what we showed in the original study. That being said, we are still showing analysis results under existing conditions that, demonstrate some level of delay under the existing conditions as well. So we did get some additional comments from the board about speeds in the area. So we went ahead and collected speed information along East Street because we did hear some of the resident and member concerns about that as well. And we found that the 85th percentile speed, which is the speed at which 85% of the vehicles are traveling at or below, is generally slightly above the posted speed limit on Route 5 and slightly above on East Street. Certainly being above the posted speed limit is something that certainly we take into account when we do our analysis as well. And looking at those new speed data, the speeds that we collected, and evaluated our site distance requirements based on AASHTO guidelines and recommendations that AASHTO gives based on intersection site distance. Those minimum and recommended values are still met given the existing speeds that we've measured. So in that instance, it's fairly consistent with what we submitted in the original traffic study, was that there is not a safety deficiency at this intersection. And, the crash data also demonstrates that there is not any sort of safety issue at this intersection. So one of the other comments was to look at the trip generation comparison between some of the different land use codes. And, we still feel that we used a land use code that was very much applicable to the type of development that the Dunkin' is, be it, it has a, drive-through coffee shop use, and it also has, indoor seating. And, some of the other land use codes that we looked at did not have one or more of those factors. So we feel that the land use code 934 that we used is applicable in this sense. And so the final thing we did was look at the, level of mitigation should that be implemented, as part of, the city moving forward or as part of this project. We looked at a few different levels of mitigation, one of them being if a traffic signal were implemented, and another if a roundabout was implemented. And given those potential for mitigation, we found that there is, certainly some level of improvement given the amount of traffic that approaches on East Street. Certainly want to stress that, the levels of service and delay at the East Street approach is certainly a problem that showed up in our existing and no-build analysis without implementation of this project. Our traffic study, again, concluded that a fairly large amount of vehicles that would use or patronize the Dunkin' restaurant are from vehicles that are already traveling along East Street and are already traveling along Route 5, on their way to 91 or on their way to work. So there isn't a lot of new trips generally that we would see to this site. It would be folks that are already on their, on their primary destination and decide to stop, at Dunkin' on their way. So, given that, there was some level of improvement. Again, I want to stress that a traffic signal along at the intersection is going to add some level, while it may help operations for the East Street approach, it's certainly going to add delay to the Route 5 approach, because again, right now those approaches operate freely with no control. The only delay that we see under existing conditions on the Route 5 approach, are for those vehicles that are turning left on East Street from Route 5 northbound. So again, there would be some level of implementation with, constructability and what sort of, lane requirements, we would certainly want to investigate that a little bit further in terms of what would be the ideal lane configuration at these approaches. And we would also want to make sure that we're accommodating for, multimodal uses and making sure that pedestrians can correctly traverse the intersection. And, we've certainly heard a lot of feedback from both the abutters and from the board about the existing bicycle facility along Route 5. So we would want to be amenable to those causes as well. So as far as the roundabout goes, that's something that, definitely MassDOT has asked that we look at when we, look at other implementation projects as part of, other statewide grants. So given the nature of the intersection and the type of delay that we see generally, that, T intersection, we want to at least investigate, the roundabout from a couple different perspectives, be it, geometrically, does it fit in this location? And again, how would we integrate that multimodal approaches to the roundabout as well? But from a capacity standpoint, the roundabout definitely scores very highly on the lack of delay in queuing. Roundabouts generally function very well when compared to signalized intersections, and certainly function well compared to existing conditions as well. So that's something that we definitely looked at, and would be happy to answer any questions or discuss our analysis methodology any further.
Jeff, can I ask you a question about table 3 here? I just want to make sure I'm reading it right.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the first line on table 3, the left turn eastbound off of North Street.
Yes.
And it I just want to make sure I'm reading it right. So today, the average vehicle delay for that left turn is 151.3 seconds. Is that right?
Yes. So that was using the accepted gap that we measured out in the field. So for comparison purposes, table 2 is what we originally put in the traffic study. And that's what the highway capacity manual uses, 6.9 second gap acceptance and 7.5 acceptance for right turn. So what we found when we did our field calibration was that the gap acceptance was much lower. So we went ahead and used the analysis software using the smaller gap acceptance, and then use that data to compare to come up with those values.
So is that not like an observed delay, or is that's just calculated based on the traffic flow and the average time that someone should need for a gap to make the cut?
Exactly, that second part. And the reason we hesitated against collecting actual delay was just because of the difference in traffic volumes now due to COVID, based on what we had during our initial traffic data collection back in 2019. So again, without COVID, we could probably do an apples to apples comparison as to how, traffic volumes were then versus now. But given we just applied that additional gap acceptance to the volumes we already had, so that we were kind of given, that's why table 2 and 3 are included, just to kind of give you a sense of just what that field calibration does to the analysis.
So table 3 is actually like a shorter, you need a shorter window to make your turn, right? So it's less conservative, is that right?
It is definitely less conservative, but we think it more meets the needs of the actual location, given the composition of driver behavior and the existing geometry.
Okay. But so here's the part, I mean, it seems to be sort of the underlying thing about all of this with the traffic is that, like, I think we can all agree the intersection is a mess as it is, right? I mean, it's not serving us very well.
Correct.
And so this has 151 seconds. That's like 2.5 minutes right now for that left turn. And with no build, it goes up to like 3 minutes, 45 seconds or so, which is obviously not ideal. But then with the 2027 build, it's over 5.5 minutes for a left turn. That seems crazy to me. I mean, that's not really sustainable, is it?
No. Definitely the wrong direction.
Mr. Chairman, could I speak to that?
Please.
Rob Levesque from our Levesque Associates. So we now, I think it's fair to say, fully understand this intersection. We've studied it pretty well. We've had conversations with Mass DOT. We've had conversations with the mayor and with your planner. We understand the issue, I think, and even more so than maybe even ourselves, I think Mr. Sardinia understands the issue. He wants, this is a great location. You know that traffic obviously generates a lot of business for these types of uses. So that's a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. And obviously the customer experience is first and foremost. So we've had some pretty, heartfelt discussions about the traffic here. And Mr. Sardinia, through his traffic engineers, has essentially established that a signal is required. I think we all see that a signal makes sense here, and we see that not only is there an existing problem that's going to grow, but we would potentially be contributing to that. So that is not something that that is. Obviously the city has a bunch of different intersections without, our quote unquote little big project. We'll call it a little big project. So with that, Mr. Sardinia is going to look to finance and to develop an improvement here, a signalized improvement to this intersection. So we talked about that at length. This subsequent to one of the recent discussion with the mayor. He has determined that will be and can be and will be feasible for him to pursue. So the solution that we talked about with Jeff and McMahon Associates is really, the signalized intersection at this particular location, which is controlled by Mass DOT. And when we had discussions with Mass DOT, they certainly were receptive to the idea of, solving this issue, and certainly wanted to see mitigation for the use. So I think it's clear in our mind, and just so the board understands where we're coming from as a team and where Mr. Sardinia is coming from, we fully expect and understand the need to put a signal here. It's not something that the city currently has funds or had on in their TIP program project list or anything like that at this point, and we understand that. We respect that, and we appreciate the time the mayor has given us and the planner's given us with regard to that. So Mr. Sardinia has established again that we think that the signal is a viable solution to a problem that the city currently has, and we think that we can help with that. What we would like to do is hear from the board with regard to some of the other related issues this evening, which we did, we discussed this evening. I may have missed a couple of those, but we wanted to get a feel from the board is that if this traffic is resolved through a significant financial contribution, really financing the entire light or signal, I should call it. If that's the case, and we can come up with a solution that is approved by Mass DOT, by your city engineers, and meets with the planner's approval, et cetera. Will the project on its merits, given that solution as part of our project, and our project would be subject to that, are there other related issues that we need to resolve before we would move forward with, communicating specifically with Mass DOT, letting McMahon start looking at a design solution and figuring out the timing on funding that, with the understanding that, the Dunkin' Donuts isn't going to go up or be occupied or have an occupancy permit prior to any traffic solution being affected. So I know it's a mouthful, but.
Okay, yeah, so that's news to me. So, are you envisioning like a decision where there would be a condition that, they can't operate until that intersection is signalized to the city and the state's satisfaction or something?
Yeah, and I apologize to the planner because I haven't had the opportunity to discuss that with him. So I wouldn't push that for this evening in any way, shape, or form. But I would like to at least discuss the project on its merits, assuming that the traffic was resolved, so that we could potentially continue forward to provide us a little bit more time to communicate with Mass DOT. And then we would fully expect to try to be back to you in a short period of time with what we would call a schematic solution and, some input from DEP on timing, so that if we were to request, assuming everything else was okay, request an approval, and certainly we would be happy to accept a decision that was subject to the satisfactory resolution and approval from DOT for that signal. And obviously that incorporates anything the city would need to have input on as well.
Jim, comment, question?
Yes. If I'm understanding correctly, there's a suggestion to table discussions of traffic tonight to come up at a later meeting. We'll obviously continue this on the suggestion that there's a willingness to pursue the possibility of signalizing. I, for one, find that exciting. Traffic is really the big issue for me on this project, and I'm willing to table the discussion of that personally tonight. I don't know how the rest of the board feels, such that we bring it up again when more information about that comes forth.
Yeah, Jeff.
So I guess I apologize because I guess I have a couple more mechanical questions about this, about like the process of what Mr. Levesque was requesting. I think I understand it in general, but one of the questions based on hearing this now is, was your proposal in line with what members Arbus suggested, which is to kind of postpone the decision, or were you more asking for the opinion of the board on whether this would resolve the issue? The biggest thing that I would ask at the moment hearing that is how long would you be expecting to wait? I think the most critical approval that you suggested you would obtain is Mass DOT. With all due respect, my understanding is that they're not the most rapid, agency to give an approval of a substantial project. So that, and the city, the city engineer, and that can happen more quickly. But the approval from Mass DOT, that everything that I've ever been told is that it's a lengthy process.
Yeah.
So I'm a little worried with just the understanding of past practice to approve something subject to some other approval, that is unknown. I don't know if that's a mechanism that we can do. We don't want to talk through that a little bit.
Yep, understood. So I guess to answer your question, I think there's a couple different pieces that I was trying to fit in the puzzle. So the first piece being, does site function, right? And building, look and feel, and do we feel like aside from traffic, do we feel like a special permit can be issued for that? If so, if not, what do we need to do to satisfy the concerns of the planning board? If so, then obviously there's a significant investment. I don't know if it's $500,000. I'll let the traffic guys figure that out. But let's just say for round numbers, it's $500,000 that Mr. Sardinia would be, putting in, directly paying for these mitigation improvements that would benefit the city. Hopefully, obviously before the store would open. So if he's going to pursue those, obviously. If he's not getting a Dunkin' as much as he loves the city of Easthampton, he's not gonna pay $500,000 for improvements. But if we're trying to bridge the gap between, okay, do we have a project, right, where we're gonna resolve the traffic ideally. It might not be the perfect solution, but it should be a pretty darn good solution. It's certainly going to benefit the city of Easthampton with an existing problem. It'll certainly benefit Mr. Sardinia with the function of Dunkin'. If we can get that moving forward in a design process, knowing, we're willing to do a little bit of work to that end to be able to come back to you in a month, maybe a month and a half, 2 months, whatever it might be, with a schematic and with something that says, okay, this is what we think it is. This is how long it's going to take. We think we can implement it. It's going to cost X number of dollars, and this is the process. And provide that to the planning board, whenever that time would be. Say it's 2 months from now. If we do that, then at that point we would be looking for a decision in some way, shape, or form, so that Mr. Sardinia had a project, and then could start begin to expend money on design. We'll say that's $100,000. So there's some big numbers here that we would certainly endeavor to resolve the problem with. However, obviously without a project, there's no project to fund it, and there's no one to fund it. So we would like to figure out how to bridge that gap, and we're open to ideas, but that's the general concept we're trying to, those are the puzzle pieces.
Brenda.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the creativity being brought to this. I don't know. I guess I'm wondering how this would actually work. And I agree with Jeff that these things typically can take years. And I don't know. I mean, what if I worry about designing an intersections traffic solution around, you know, the potential Dunkin'. Are the engineers free to, you know, come up with the best solution for Easthampton apart from Dunkin'? And what if, I mean, I guess I would almost like to see the effect of, you know, the traffic solution. There may be unintended consequences of that could affect a Dunkin'. So I don't know. I'm really wondering how this would work. And then lastly, how much of the work is going to be on the part of Easthampton? And is this a priority for the city? You know, what if the engineer has 10 things on his plate and this wasn't one of them? You know, I don't know. I just have so many questions about how this could work successfully.
Well, you've identified, we've certainly identified a problem for you. You know, Mr. Sardini has spent a lot of money in the traffic studies, I can assure you. So we've identified a problem. We're identifying a solution. And is that solution a perfect solution, or is that solution going to create another problem? There's just, you know, the solution of my problem to my problem 10 years ago is my problem today. So, I mean, yes, there's probably a number of factors to consider. But as far as what the town would be responsible, city would be responsible for, they would not be responsible for any of the design fees or the construction fees. You know, your city engineer and probably your planner would probably want to be involved in that process. I think just because they would want to be, as well as I'm sure the mayor and any other players, DPW, et cetera. So we would certainly expect to include them, but they wouldn't be designing it. They would be reviewing it, commenting, a lot like the roundabout over at Ferry Street was just done. You know, that was a different funding source, obviously, but you know, the design was done by McMahon Associates. The work was implemented and financed through MassWorks, and you know, we understand that that's a different funding source, and we're not looking for that. We understand that this isn't necessarily a prime candidate for any of that. So we understand where we are financially in terms of contribution. I think it's a great opportunity for the city. I think, you know, to find a private developer that will put up $500,000 to further his project and solve a problem at the same time, I would fully expect that Mass DOT will not just be looking at Dunkin', but they will absolutely be looking at the intersection as a whole. And you know, they don't care about Dunkin'. They care about, you know, their intersection. So I would assume that they would have the best interest of the city, as would the city, who would be involved in the process.
So,
Just one follow-up.
yeah, go ahead, Brenda.
I forgot.
All right, I'll jog your memory with my question. So I'm still trying to figure out the process you're envisioning. So it sounds like you think you could be back in a month or two regarding the feasibility of the concept of funding a signal at that intersection.
And maybe I'll let Jeff Bandini speak to a little bit more to the process, the design process, because I think that will help, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Help kind of fill in the holes.
I mean, I think what Brenda's getting at, I think, is one of the things that I'm nervous about is the idea that we would sort of grant a conditional special permit sight unseen for the intersection, and then who knows where that process leads. And
no, the intersection would be a completely separate approval. You know, I guess what, you know, that we'd have to look at what the condition potentially would be, but let's just say everything else is resolved by that point. And let's just say that we know that we can't do a Dunkin' Donuts without a signalized intersection that's feasible and satisfactory to the city and potentially their peer review or whatever, or whoever wants to review it. But at least we know going into the design and, you know, potentially construction project, that there's a project and a reason for Mr. Sardinia to finance it. That's kind of the game plan.
So you would envision a conditional special permit that says, if, you know, we sign off on that today, and as long as there's a signal there that satisfies whoever we designate,
yep,
Mr. Sardinia knows if he satisfies that party that he can operate as Duncan instead of either doing it sight unseen or the alternative, which also is impractical, which is come back to us once there's a signal there and resubmit your application, where he obviously doesn't want to spend that money there.
Right, understood. I think you understand it.
Okay, all right, Brenda?
That's the idea.
So I'm just thinking of, you know, what could go wrong. And so let's say everybody's on board and it's terrific and the design is ready to go. But something happens and the Duncan, you know, the owner no longer wants to pursue the project. Let's say another property came up or there's a horrible depression, whatever.
Then you still have traffic.
Yeah, well, so what if we're going down the road, but we haven't got the money, you know, yet? How is that all going to work? Like it.
Well, so there would be a design. They'd have to finance Mr. Sardinia would have to pay for the design. That would have to be approved by DOT and everybody else. And then that would go out to bid. And then when it goes out to bid, contractors would bid on the project, and then that money would need to be put in place before the bid could be awarded. So that money would be put up so that there's no real risk. Any bonds associated with the construction work would be part of the spec for the contractors. So I think that stuff is pretty easy. So let's just say Mr. Sardinia is $100,000 into the design and says, you know what, this is crazy. It's too costly. It doesn't make sense. Then what we do is we hand the drawings over to the city and say, here's the solution. We're not going to do a Duncan. But generally speaking, I don't think there's a real downside to the city. I think it's just, you know, if Mr. Sardinia is going to commit to this kind of money, we're going to know very shortly. We'll really try to define that process. Mm-hmm. We'll know shortly. You know, this happens all the time, by the way. A lot of, you know, CVSs and other types of businesses do this all the time because they're, you know, because without it, they're, you know, they really can't function. So this isn't out of the ordinary in any way.
Does the planning board have the authority to authorize this? I mean,
I don't know. No, Mass DOT controls the intersection, so really that doesn't have anything to do with the planning board. I think what the planning board has the authorization to do is approve a project subject to very specific conditions under a special permit.
Yeah, so we can make it a condition, you know, that's even outside of our control like that, Brenda. I mean, we certainly can't say you're allowed to signalize that intersection. That's not even city property, let alone planning board's jurisdiction. But Jeff, you got something to add?
Yeah, two quick things. I think Brenda asked a question about, you know, what does the signal do? And there is a table, it's table 7, which does articulate kind of the same numbers. It does show that there is a benefit to the intersection. So that is there. So the basic data does show that. And then, you know, hearing the discussion, I think I was just taken aback at first. There could be a way, and it wouldn't necessarily be the first time, but it would be more of the recent things that we've done. You know, the Ferry Street project, the redevelopment did acknowledge that a change to the intersection was going to be necessary, and then incorporated that into the decision. I think the only thing that's a little bit different with that one is that one is a much larger project that was going to be in phases. So phase 1 could occur, which is happening, but phase 1 could have occurred without the roundabout. But as you got into the different phases of that project, the roundabout would be required. Luckily, everything aligned. A lot of work from a lot of people made that align really well. And as everyone was discussing this, I'm definitely a little bit more comfortable with the idea. And I think River Valley Co-op was the other project that I'd have to go back to the decision, but I think the planning board acknowledged, because it was important for River Valley Co-op to be working with Mass DOT, the planning board acknowledged that in that case, the planning board acknowledged that the project could go forward without the left turn lane, but that it was highly desirable. And I think that was information that Mass DOT wanted to hear, that the city approved the basic project. But then we would just have to be really careful with the project is approved based on the signal, and that no construction would really occur, until there's like a contractor who has been awarded the bid, for the construction or some kind of threshold. So after hearing I'm more comfortable with the concept, and I think I understand now what the applicant team is looking for, which is, there is public, there's members of the public here too. So hearing from them, but if there are any other issues that the board feels have not been addressed other than this traffic, it sounded like then we would continue for maybe a month or two to kind of figure out if this is feasible. And then at that point, if they come back and say it is not feasible, then we would probably be talking about maybe the project is withdrawn or something. But if it continues to be feasible, then we would chart another, chart a course at that point. So I think I have a better understanding at this point. It does seem like it is possible.
Thanks, Jeff. Jim?
I don't want to seg too much. People may still have questions about postponing the discussion of this while they work this out, and that's fine. So I apologize if I'm pulling us off. But I'm wondering if Mr. Levesque can comment on the earlier comment brought up by Member Cockshaw about that gap in the back. So I'm wondering if you know anything about that.
I didn't hear the comment. I apologize. I wasn't on. I was on another public hearing. But Jessica, could you bring me up to speed and I can try to answer?
Sure. So it's there's the retaining wall in the back. There's a small gap, and I don't know the design. Gap? Yeah, hold on. I can bring it up. One sec.
We thought
on the graphic or on the
no, on the site plan, on where the retaining wall, where the dumpster pad is in the back. There's a small
there's a little gap there to let the grade is a lot less crazy back there, and we wanted to let bikes get in and out.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what that was for.
Okay.
Yeah, we should look at that just to make sure there's no stormwater escaping there, because it does appear that it's grading down through that gap into the bike path.
Yeah, we could put a berm on that or something.
Yeah.
I just wanted we wanted to let people get in with, so they didn't have to lift up over the wall. But we can adjust that. That would be easy to do.
Is it a bit of a difficult place to come in because the curved driveway for picking up your food is right there? It seems like it's nice to have a place to come in, I admit, and the reality is people who are going to want to go over one way or the other, and they're going to go right over the guardrail. So I'm not sure if it's actually more dangerous not to put it there, being honest. But right there, it seems like it's right in the roadway. I just question.
Yeah, right at that curve. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the gap is for. It was basically to provide access. Otherwise, you're kind of bringing them right past the dumpster, and on the rest of the wall in the back, there's a fairly good grade change, so it's not going to be.
There's also
we're not going to want anybody climbing over.
Right. So, but it even shows that there's like a break. It shows that there's a break in.
I guess we could close it off, but I'd rather have an access point. I think it'd be a nice little spot for people to roll their bikes across the natural terrain there to get up.
Yeah.
Jeff.
All right. No,
I'm sorry, Chris, you still talk?
Yeah, I just wanted to, even if it looks like you've even shown a break in the curb line there. So even if you still have that, but bituminous berm, I imagine that's what that is there. Even if that continues instead of stopping there, so you still have your stormwater remains on site, that would be preferable.
Jess, can you go to the grading plan too? Should be the next sheet. And I don't know if there's a way to expand your screen, or maybe I'm just not seeing it.
I think that was the grading plan.
That was the grading plan, yeah, and it shows the grading kind of going.
Oh, that's a drainage.
Is it possible to round that so that a bike can still get over it, but it'll still be?
Yeah, we can make a mountable Cape Cod berm, no problem. Or there's a couple different solutions we could do there.
Yeah, because it does look like.
It does. Chris, I see what you're saying. It does look like that. That would let the stormwater escape to some extent. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would carry that berm right across.
Okay.
Jeff.
Good comment.
On this, if it's a drainage issue, if there's some way to look at it, I think the keeping it open is a good option for the future. I appreciate that, because I think we don't know what kind of, the city may want to talk to the applicant, if this happens, about formalizing a path to there. And then I think the one thing that would come to my mind, and I know we just talked about a lot of things that the applicant would take on, but maybe just a crosswalk kind of striped, if something came to fruition in the future, like agreement from the applicant to kind of just stripe a little walkway from there to the patio and the bike rack, like that might be really beneficial for a future amenity that we don't have a plan for now.
To the extent the bike trail committee is comfortable, we're comfortable in kind of formalizing that a little bit. We think it's a logical connection. We think it could be quite nice.
Right.
To be able to go get a coffee and then get on the bike trail. It's kind of the terminus of the bike trail there. So no problem, Jeff. And I know obviously Mr. Sardini was committed to, some sort of connection. So, I think we have time to figure out what that needs to be. And we would be happy to look at that.
Okay. And then, Mr. Belcher-Timmy, I guess just before we really depart on traffic, we do have the city's peer reviewer on the call. And I guess if we are moving in a shift away from that or to general public comment, I just I would want to ask Mr. Severia if, you had a letter that was provided in response to McMahon's study, and I did send it a little late to the applicant. They received it this afternoon, but based on the discussion, do you have any other thoughts or questions or concerns that you would want to raise at this point?
Well, I think Jeff explained the contents of the letter pretty well. I mean, all the additional data collection and analysis that was summarized in that supplemental information, in our opinion, was conducted in accordance with standard practice. So we do feel that those are all acceptable responses to the issues that were brought up at the last meeting that they were trying to address. This idea of our letter, kind of further went on to say though that the issue of minimizing the impacts of the project hadn't really been addressed, and of course the discussion here tonight has really provided that missing piece of the information. As Rob explained, this intersection is totally under the jurisdiction of Mass DOT, and so any improvement proposal at the intersection would occur under a Mass DOT permit. And so it would go through the kind of regular project development process that DOT undertakes with any project, even TIP projects or their own in-house design projects, where there will be multiple design submissions. It will be reviewed by probably mostly within the district, and ultimately the design will have to comply with all Mass DOT standards, and that can be a lengthy process. I'm not sure that there would be any right-of-way procedures that would need to take place, because that's the one thing that really slows down this whole process. But in general, that's kind of the way it works, is that the town would be fully coordinated with in terms of the review, and there would be ample opportunity for the town to have the city to have its own input on the direction of the design and the final product.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
Okay, so if planning board members don't have any other comments or questions, I would like to open this up to the public. And I'm not going to restrict people to not talk about traffic tonight. I think it's fine if people, I feel like people are coming to these meetings and it's hard to tell them not to talk about what brought them here. And I also think there's a chance that either people have comments about the idea of signalizing the intersection that might be relevant, or they might also have comments about where we might find ourselves at a future meeting, which is without a signalized intersection. So I'm not going to restrict what people want to talk about, but if there are members of the public with comments or questions, You can raise your Zoom hand. You can turn on your video and raise your physical hand. You can press *9 on a phone or unmute yourself and request to address us. I've got a hand for Mayor LaChapelle. We'll start with her.
Hi, good evening. I would like to just read as the chair just mentioned, thank you for allowing all comment this evening because it's about traffic. So I'm just going to read it and then I'll actually submitted it via email to Planner Bag. And this was before I had heard the signal idea. While I appreciate the best intentions of the applicant, American Dream LLC, I ask the board within their mandate to consider the following when reviewing these permit applications. Traffic mitigation. Available public funds for needed site-based traffic mitigation do not fall within the city's DPW or economic development priorities. Both Mass DOT and the Regional Planning Commission have advised me that traffic mitigation grant applications for this intersection will not be competitive enough to be funded due to more urgent applications. The city has prioritized through different public processes projects that include traffic mitigation. This intersection is a low priority for the weakening grant applications for mitigation. With or without the city prioritizing this project, the timeline for design, public hearings, grant application preparation, and actual implementation could very easily take 5 or more years. I also asked the board to consider zoning and that the city's 2013 Highway Business District Study recommends that the site's current zoning of highway business be reviewed and returned to some form of residential zoning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening and all of your work on this board. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments or questions? Again, if you need to, you can even unmute and just ask to address. I don't see anybody. Okay, so I guess the question at this point, folks, is...
Wait, hello.
Oh, I'm sorry, I got someone.
I'm so sorry.
Hi, Keely, is that you?
Yes, it is. Can I address the board?
Please.
Thank you so much. Let me just turn on my video so you can see how glamorous my life is. If I can even put, okay, here I am. Yay. You can see the top of my head. Okay, so I wanted to speak on behalf of myself. I'm an immediate abutter. I live at 15 East Street, and I am still concerned about the loss of trees that are basically that patch of trees back there is not only home to a lot of birds and animals, it mitigates a lot of, it does a lot to cool and mitigate water that wouldn't be done by a paved surface. And furthermore, it shields us from the site of Route 5, the sights and sounds of Route 5. And so that's my primary concern. I also wanted to talk on behalf of Lauren Simmons, who could not be here today. She lives on Fairfield Ave. And she made several points she wanted me to convey. She objects to the loss of habitat, like I just said. She also objects to the aesthetic fact of having a fast food restaurant right at the border of Easthampton. She's worried about the traffic situation, and especially the location of a fast food restaurant between the sort of nature of the Oxbow and Mount Tom, and what it would do to that sort of to draw animals in there, especially if there's a lot of refuse around the area. And she wanted me to say that it's important to know that it's more than people who are just immediately immediate neighbors like myself, that she lives way over on the other side of Easthampton, and she traverses East Street regularly and does not want this installation for all the reasons I just said. So anyway, thank you. And thank you for all the work and attention you've given this.
Thank you. Mr. Gomez, Councilor Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Omar Gomez, Councilor Gomez. I live in 14 Clark Avenue. I just want to say a few things. The first one is thank you for the applicants of this project, but I think it's really important to let everybody know that the traffic in that area with that particular business is going to be crazy. It's going to be intense, especially for the neighbors. And I think it's really important for this board to think about the neighbors first, because I think it's really important for them. By the way, we have another intersection in our city. They are more dangerous than that one. I think the DOT should be put the eyes on South and Main Street. They have a bunch of accidents every year. After saying that, I just want to read some of the report that came from the group of residents and some of the city employees that was part of the committee in 2013. And one of the recommendations was the Highway Business District zone along the Route 10 Northampton Street corridor extend from the residential neighborhood near Groveland Street to O'Neill Street at the city limits to Northampton. This should be preserved with the boundaries of delineated of the 16 applicable zoning map. It's the only area with the city that accommodate business expansion. A small, and this is the really important part, a small, easily area at the intersection of East Street and Route 5 that is currently zoned highway business need to be reviewed and appropriated, alienative, using a rezoning should be considered. That never happened, and I don't know why. But I think this board should be aware of that there was a recommendation in 2013 because it's a really tiny part of that street, and you guys should have that in your mind. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I got a comment for David Kinsel again, please.
Hi, yes, I'm sorry. I'd just like to I think reiterate previous comments that I made previously at a meeting, how excited I am for the Sardinia family to try to come into Easthampton and do some business here. And I understand the issue with maybe re-examining this situation, but I think, or this zoning area, but I do like the fact that there is maybe more opportunity to bring in some businesses and to generate some economic activity in Easthampton. And I would hope that we can hold on to that and maybe even this be part of the process that improves. And I think regardless of if it's Dunkin' Donuts that has this issue or if it's going to be the next person's problem, then you're going to be ending up with business properties that nobody's going to want to use. And so I think we have a good opportunity here with the Sardinia family who wants to come in and has shown again a willingness. And Mr. Levesque, the stuff that you presented looks fabulous. It looks great. I can't wait to see how it all plays out here. Okay, but I'm happy for it, and I hope everything goes forward on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim?
I have a question about what I think is a really important topic that Councilor Gomez and Mayor LaChapelle brought up, which was the issue of this committee that made a recommendation that the zoning should change in this area, which I think is interesting. And as it was said, it didn't happen. Isn't it true that we are bound by the zoning as it is at the point of the application? If we were to reject this on the basis that we felt that it should be changed zoning, that's not actually, we can't do that, right? Am I wrong? Jeff, maybe you can pitch in on this. We have to operate under the zoning that it is currently. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct, Jim.
But isn't one of the ordinance numbers, I don't know, I'll leave that to Jeff and Curtis, have to do with sort of appropriateness of maybe the building and or the use for the neighborhood?
Yeah,
Is that a consideration?
Yeah, I think, Brenda, like you can definitely use that highway business report as an indication of sort of like maybe will of the community or character or things like that. But you couldn't say this is denied because even though it's still highway business, it should have been changed to residential, because for whatever reason, the city council hasn't seen the reason they need to do it.
Right.
And so you can't really hold that against an applicant.
Right.
For that, but you can say, this is further evidence of why you don't think it fits in this residential community.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Other comments or questions? Board members or members of the public?
I have a question about timeline here. There was a suggestion that you're going to, Mr. Levesque and team, go and seek some information about this whole traffic concept, bring it to the mayor. I definitely would like to hear further feedback from her on it when you get this project together and all the other information that you put together. How long is it going to take for, how much time do you need before our next meeting?
So before I answer that question, if it's okay, because I was late to the meeting and Jessica was kind of carrying the ball for us, are there other outstanding issues for the board that for some reason you don't see, as hard as it is to divorce traffic from the process, just for a second, hypothetically speaking, if traffic wasn't an issue, are there other issues? Because if we satisfied the site related questions and the aesthetic questions and the building questions with the graphics that have been provided, then I think we're happy to move forward in getting some really good answers for you. We would like to probably take 2 months because we don't want to come back and not have answers for you with the holidays and everything else. It would make sense that we continue for 2 months, because that would give us time to put together what we would call a schematic that we could discuss in detail with Mass DOT, come back with a timeline and a critical path, and know that there is, arguably is a solution, which would obviously have to go through the DOT process that Mr. Severia had mentioned. I think, and Jeff, I'd like Jeff to just chime in. I would think 2 months should be plenty of time to do that. Jeff, would you agree?
Hey, Jeff.
Is that yes?
He wants to know which Jeff you're asking.
Oh, Jeff Bandini. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I figured. I just wanted to clarify. Yeah, I agree. We've already reached out to the folks at District 2 where we've already have a buy-in that they would have interest in improving this intersection. So I'm hoping with that sort of pre-engagement, we would be able to, get together with them and talk about, what they would like to see at this intersection. McMahon has obviously, by virtue of submitting that memo, conceptualized what we think would fit given the existing right-of-way, be it turning lanes and lane widths and operations and things like that. So I think we already have a step in the right direction in terms of that engagement and in terms of having an idea of what might actually fit. Now, we would need some time to coordinate that meeting, like you said, Rob, with the holidays and everything, and kind of just discuss what information is available. We have survey at that intersection, by virtue of doing the site plan. I'm not sure if we have the limits of what we would want to include in any sort of intersection conceptual design. We might need additional survey further north and south on Route 5 in order to fully encapsulate what we want to include to make sure that the turning lane widths were long enough and any sort of improvements to, bicycle or pedestrian infrastructure were incorporated and things of that nature. So, as Mr. Severia mentioned, if we can stay within the existing right-of-way and kind of ease that process a little bit, I think that puts us, on the faster track, I would say, to getting some sort of solution. So I think a 2-month check-in would certainly be worthwhile, and we could, articulate at least, where we are in the process if we're not able to collect the additional survey information, or if we're unable to put something together, we'll at least be able to provide an update that puts us in that path to giving something that we feel the city would accept as far as approval of this project with the conditions that you noted.
So Jeff Bandini, I guess somewhere in there is 2 months, do you think sufficient if we were talking about continuing this?
Yeah, I agree with Rob. I think 2 months is sufficient.
Okay. And Jeff Bagg, did you have a comment or a question?
Yes. The vein of this is to try to be helpful and just clear, kind of moving forward. I think the applicant's asking a pretty specific question, which I don't think the expectation is an absolute, but to try something that member Salyer asked, was about the findings, section. And I just wanted to touch on that really quick because I'm trying to be helpful. So there is not one finding that talks about the overall use. So there's no required finding that you could say that the use just doesn't work, but it's the series of findings all cobbled together. So traffic was one of our biggest sticking points. There are the methods of trash disposal, which kind of goes to how the property gets used. And I'm trying to look at the section. So section G, we're in the findings section. So section G kind of talks about parking and lighting and internal traffic control. There is, I'm going to skip one, but so then I is minimization over area over which existing vegetation is removed. So pollution and groundwater and erosion, and then general nuisances. So if you take all of those combined and you think about like the speaker of the drive-through, you might look at like L, which is that it doesn't become a nuisance. So that kind of thing. We've covered a lot of that. So then going back to H, which is that the applicant's efforts to integrate the development into the existing landscape. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. Nope. Sorry, I'm butchering this now. J, which is the consistency of the development with respect to setback, area, placement of parking, architectural style, landscaping, and landscaping of the surrounding buildings and development. So I think it's important because it's the most important thing that we might look at is the architectural design. And there was some consideration of that. That is something that could ultimately be designed to meet some, it could be achievable. And at the end of the day, it's not the drive-through Dunkin' that would cause that criteria to not get met. It might be that the design is still not compatible. So I'm just trying to prepare the board that it's for the use, it's the continuum of all those findings that you would make sure that you can find on all of them. And it seemed to me like traffic was one of the most important ones. Mm-hmm. The character of the neighborhood doesn't really fit in this section. There is one other section that I would call, people's attention to, which is 10.5, which is the commercial standards. So there is the architectural design is what is trying to be compatible with the character and scale. So, I'm just trying to articulate the difference between, I guess, the architectural design and the use, and just make sure that we're clear that there's not just one finding that says the use doesn't work. It's kind of the cobbling them all together. So I'm just trying to air that out now because I think that's the applicant's request, is if there's something there that hasn't been kind of enough discussed enough or resolved to pinpoint traffic as one of the final issues. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, Jeff, my plan was to basically do sort of like a straw poll like we did with Loudville, which is non-binding and things can come up. But I think that like the ultimate question is basically, with the sort of issues that have been raised and the conditions that we've contemplated, assuming a universe where traffic is not a problem, and a query whether the signal will even make it not a problem or just less of a problem. But setting aside the traffic stuff, is there a world where you could imagine voting for the rest of this stuff if traffic was resolved somehow? And so I'll go first. Personally, for me, I think that traffic is the one that's been holding me up. I think that the rest of it, I think we have addressed for the most part with some of the issues, some of the things that the applicant has already agreed to mitigate some of those problems. Some of them are conditions that we've talked about. But I certainly think that if we somehow find a vehicle to fix the intersection, then I can contemplate voting for the project. the rest of it is not something that's going to hold me up. Anybody else on the planning board feel like offering any opinion one way or the other? I'm not holding anyone to anything or requiring it. Chris?
Yep. So just going back to Ms. Sexton's question, Rob, you're not proposing to remove any trees that are not on your property, correct? You're just proposing some removal and then replacement with shrubs and trees on your property?
Correct. Yeah, nothing on property will be removed.
So, I mean, personally, I agree. I think the applicant has done a very good job responding to all of the city and resident questions. I'm accepting traffic so far. And I think that this revised design is good. I just think that I would be okay voting for it with traffic being resolved at that signaled intersection or some sort of improvements at that intersection.
Thanks, Chris. Jim?
I'll add that another comment that was made was about the sound. I think Jeff mentioned it again, and they did adjust that as well. I think they really have done a great job of addressing all the other questions. There were several coming in, turning in and out from the actual property, parking, a lot of stuff. For me, all that's been resolved through these several meetings, but I have to be honest, the one issue of traffic was big enough that I was prepared to vote no because of the transition to the left to E to F. So resolving this traffic issue for me, yes, that removes what I see as all other obstacles, barring anything unusual popping up.
Thanks, Jim. Harry, Austin, Brenda, anybody want to offer an opinion or not? Nope.
Like I said.
Yeah. Oh, Harry, go ahead.
Yeah, just the traffic, as far as I can see.
Okay.
Whether they put a stoplight in there or not, whether they stop at a stop sign for 5 minutes or a stoplight for 5 minutes, what difference is it going to make?
Yeah, so I think that's the key distinction, right, Harry, is we're not saying that this traffic signal that they're proposing is going to solve the problem, just that I think what Rob is saying is fair, is they're going to spend a lot more time trying to come up with a plan and money, and before they invest that time and money, which may still result in a no vote, they at least want to know that the rest of this stuff has sort of satisfied us with big issues, and it sounds like that's where you are. Maybe you're skeptical about whether the traffic signal will even solve the problem, but
what they have to do is just address the mayor's issues. There's no money for a traffic light. The state wouldn't invest in one down there because it's not a big enough intersection. So, I mean, until I can address that, what are you going to do?
Well, I mean, their proposal is to have the applicant pay for it.
Yeah, we're addressing that. We're going to pay for it, Harry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Harry. Brenda?
This one is really tough for me. I really appreciate the lengths the applicant has gone to. So many of my concerns have been addressed, so I really appreciate that. The things that nag me are public safety issues. The traffic is, a deal breaker, obviously, for all of us, and including the applicant. You recognize it and you share the concern, which is wonderful. I don't know whether the mitigation efforts, will address it. I mean, who knows? It's everyone will do their best effort to mitigate the problem for sure. But I think the public safety issues for me extend beyond the vehicle traffic. It's about biking. It's about walking. There's a bike trail there. There's going to be a new open space just a half mile down the road that people are going to connect to. I do worry about the traffic being across from a residential district. If you look at a satellite map, every home across the street is R35. So it's like I live in a residential, but across the street is, a highly trafficked drive-through. So I'm struggling with that because I do think it's public safety, quality of life issues. We have 2 Duncans. Do we need a third? This is how I'm trying to balance what's in the best interest of the city. And, I think South Hadley's about our size and they have 1. And I think Northampton has 4, but they have like 26,000 people. And, so I'm just really struggling with this, and I'm not decided at all, except that you know, that traffic issue definitely has to be addressed. But even if it is addressed, I'm not sure where I am with this. So that's where I am.
Totally fair, Brenda. Thank you. Austin, don't have to add, but you want to chime in?
Don't have anything to add other than thank you for the update on Mr. Sardinia's proposal to study further.
Great. Thanks, Austin. So I guess with that, Rob, if you guys want a couple months to talk to DOT and have this continued, we could make a motion to that effect.
That would be great. We would respectfully request that. Thank you.
Okay.
Dates?
Yeah, I was going to say that's farther out of my calendar than I know.
Me too.
For a while there, I wasn't sure we were going to make it to the next year.
Not there yet, Jim. Don't jinx us. Jeff, are we, it looks like we got a February 2nd or a February 16th would be 2 months, right? So if we wanted 2 full months, it would be Tuesday the 16th.
Of what?
Of February.
I just have a quick question, and I apologize for the nature of this, but that time frame in February, you know, it's typically school break, or is it
go after that?
Is it President's Day?
It is. It's the Tuesday after President's Day.
It is after. Okay.
So we could do March 2nd.
Actually, just to clarify, but is President's Day the week of the 15th or the week of the 22nd?
It's the week of the 15th.
It is, okay.
So the Tuesday, the 16th is the day after President's Day. It's not the week after. So it is that school vacation week.
That is just, I would just put this out there. We haven't gotten that far in the general planning board schedule, but that is sometimes a week that we shift around and push. We sometimes fluctuate that week because, well, it may not be the same this year, but that is historically a week that many people are away. And I think traditionally we've bumped like that schedule away from that 1 week. So with that with that amendment, that would be the only thing I would like to consider is not doing it.
March 2nd would be fine. Does that work for you, Rob?
Yeah, whatever works for you guys. We'll make it ourselves available. We'll be ready.
Okay. And I don't know, Jeff, do we need like a written agreement to continue this? Are we getting into timing issues where we need something from the applicant agreeing to a continuance without sort of a constructive approval risk, or are we okay still?
My understanding generally is that as long as the hearing has been opened and continued through the public hearing process, that the timeline is frozen until the hearing is closed. That's my general understanding. And I think at this point, I think the applicant, seems entirely agreeable that this is something that.
And we're requesting the continuance as well. We can, I can have Jess send over, or I can send over a letter tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
Do belts and suspenders. I think that's fine, but I think we'd be okay.
Okay, great. So I guess we're talking about a continuance to March 2nd.
I motion to continue to March 2nd at 6 p.m. the request for special permit for American Dream Realty building a Dunkin' Donuts.
Second.
All right, voting to continue to March 2nd. James.
Aye.
Brenda.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Austin.
Aye.
Harry.
Aye.
And I am an aye. All right, folks, thank you very much. This is an interesting one here late in the game, but hopefully we can find a solution that works for everybody.
Anybody got $500,000 I can borrow?
Nope.
Not it.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Take care.
I'm afraid to ask Jeff, but any other matters we need to address before we can quote unquote go home?
Just very briefly, the 121A requests for Ferry Street. So there is, a continued joint public hearing set for tomorrow evening. And it's been probably something that I will take as a slight failure to give you guys enough notice or reminders of that. But at the same time, I failed to notice the planning board having a meeting tomorrow night. So I don't think in any way any of this is detrimental to.
Wait, are we going or not?
Right. So I'm really being long-winded. What I think the idea would be that I think if the chairperson is available to attend and be there to discuss or transmit the report.
Yeah, I don't even think there's anything else to discuss, and I think our work is done with the report. So there's no deliberation. I plan on being there to virtually transmit a report that they've already received by email, but just so that there's someone there. Yeah. I don't think there's any reason for the rest of you to attend.
It was unanimous, right?
It was unanimous. No minority report and no issues. So, I mean, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything for me to add even, but I'm happy to go.
Give me some time to think about it.
Well played, Brenda. Well played.
Gosh, now that you mention it, Jim.
Okay, well, that's... Is there? I just will last piece on that. So you're not. There's no notice. You're not concerned at all about public notice in that, really, John.
We did our job already.
Yeah, the city council's meeting is all noticed, and they're conducting the public hearing. It was just we've never done this before, so out of an abundance of caution, when the first joint public hearing was held, the motion was to continue the joint public hearing to December 16th. Just as out of an abundance of caution, and it just doesn't appear that there's any deliberation on behalf of the planning board at this point. And I will say that if something of substance comes up, which anything is possible these days, one of the actions could be to potentially send it back to the planning board if there is any additional discussions, even though that there is a timeline. There is a timeline in this statute that's different than some of our other procedures. So
we could be next Tuesday.
I think the idea is that the report has been transmitted as is, and so I think Jesse will be there just to be there on behalf of the planning board. Should any questions come up, clarifications or anything like that.
Okay. One last question then before I motion to adjourn. When's our next meeting?
That's exactly what I was going to ask too. Is there a schedule for 2021 meetings?
Yeah, Curtis is on the line. I don't know if he's still awake.
I'm still here.
He's still here.
Awake.
Oh, I'm just kidding. I know he was there. January 6th, January 5th.
January 5th.
It's the next meeting. Okay.
No, it's January 6th.
No.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I've been
getting
it mixed
January
up.
6th on the calendar.
What's on the docket for that?
5th.
It's Tuesday, January 5th is the next meeting.
Okay.
Are we all agreed on that? Because I just sent 2 ads to the newspaper for.
We are. If the agenda for tonight says the next meeting is Tuesday, January 6th, so that's where the confusion is. But
okay,
that's not controlling. We'll stick with what the calendar
What's
says.
on the agenda for that?
There's 2 different applications. One for a special permit and site plan review. So 2323 Arthur Palmer Paving is retroactively approving a couple of silos. Since they're accessory structures, they need a site plan review, and since they're of a very great height, they need a special permit for 6.87. And 19 Wamelco is going forward with a marijuana cultivation in 3,600 square foot existing structure. They are going to be going before the Conservation Commission soon thereafter. That's just special permit.
And Vice Chair Zarvis, you hate when I address you this way, but I will be recusing myself from the Wamelco Way project, so be prepared.
Will do. I motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, to adjourn. Jim.
Aye.
Brenda.
No. No.
Oh my God, I love you.
If I get a minority report on a motion to adjourn, I will die.
No. And Curtis, I'm sending you a 20-page report. I want. Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Austin.
Aye.
Harry.
Aye.
And I am an aye. Good night, all of you. We have way too much fun at these things.
Good night,
Minority
everybody.
Report was a good movie. I'm on board for it. No?
Wait, what?
Minority Report was a good movie. I'm on board.
It was a good movie.
Great movie.
It was a good movie.
Merry Christmas. Happy
Yes, happy holidays, happy everything.
Yeah.
See you guys
Happy
next year.
Wassel.
Be well,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Be well.
you.
Bye-bye.